Chapter 1052. For a long time, Wang Shengxiao's image in Li Tianlan's heart had been relatively vague. The so-called vague did not mean that it was unclear, but that it had many faces. More importantly, the two of them were actually not familiar with each other. In Li Tianlan's heart, Wang Shengxiao was a very tough person. He also looked very gentle, but he was not easy to compromise. He was also a very persistent and firm person. The young generation of Zhongzhou state before Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan. At that time, Wang Shengxiao was low-key calm. The young generation of Zhongzhou state after Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Li Tianlan. Everyone watched Li Tianlan leave everyone, including Wang Shengxiao, far behind. The youngest combat capability of the Invincible Realm. His opponents were the famous Invincible Realm experts in the Dark World. They were the symbols on the divine and holy lists, Li Guangtu and Wang Tianzong. Wang Shengxiao changed from a leader to a chaser. He still stayed still and silently chased after Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Jiang Shangyu. Gu Hanshan, who used to be as famous as Wang Tianzong, had already fallen at a speed that was enough to stun people. Even if the young master of Kunlun City was a genius with the Heavenly King heart, Gu Hanshan did not make any progress in the nearly 3 years since he was defeated by Li Tianlan in the maneuver of the two academies. Instead, his realm regressed. What about Wang Shengxiao? He was still making progress silently. His mentality was not affected at all. He was stable, peaceful, and persistent. He cultivated his own martial arts and silently carried the entire Wang family of Beihai on his shoulders. In the past 2 years, except for the extremely tough declaration of war on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Shengxiao had never made any radical remarks to the outside world. Under Wang Shengxiao's command, the various forces inside Beihai had a sense of propriety. They were tough when they needed to be tough, and they gave in when they needed to give in. The Wang family of Beihai had indeed lost a lot of things in the past 2 years, but what everyone saw was that Wang Shengxiao had kept more things. In this state, Wang Shengxiao could easily remind people of the young Wang Tianzong. He was calm, steady, low-key, and silent. He looked at the whole world, but he never paid too much attention to any of his opponents or friends. He focused all his attention on the things that were worthy of his attention. He would not be angry when he was surpassed, nor would he be depressed when he was hit. He was like a high-strength spring. No matter how much pressure he was under, as long as there was a chance, he would immediately bounce back to his original shape, or even bounce higher and further. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Shengxiao silently. Wang Shengxiao's smile was weak and faint. He was not high-spirited or arrogant, but at this moment, he stood in front of Li Tianlan with indescribable confidence. The sword energy coat danced on him. The majestic sword energy flew and whistled, and the sharpness all over the sky was hidden. Wang Shengxiao stood motionless in the air, but there was an extremely condensed power slightly fluctuating with his breathing. The current you is a little interesting, Li Tianlan said calmly. He had officially entered the Invincible Realm. In other words, Li Tianlan didn't know whether he had entered the Invincible Realm, but there was no doubt that he had successfully broken through to a new level. The combat capability of the Invincible Realm had entered a new level. If it was not the Invincible Realm, what was it? There was a flash of confusion in Li Tianlan's eyes, and then he shook his head. After the breakthrough, he became extremely sensitive to all kinds of energy. The vague sword energy coat on Wang Shengxiao's body had a clear outline in his eyes. At a glance, he could roughly understand what was going on with Wang Shengxiao's state. Such a Wang Shengxiao. He was very difficult and tricky to deal with. Li Tianlan was almost sure that if he hadn't successfully broken through, he wouldn't have been a match for Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao's realm remained the same, but he had a magic weapon in his hand. The so-called magic weapon was Wang Tianzong's sword intent and sword energy, and it was the energy of Wuyo. This was the same reason that Li Tianlan could effortlessly sweep through the dark world when ruthless energy was abundant, or even more than that. If he hadn't successfully broken through, the current situation would have been a little embarrassing. Even now Li Tianlan felt a little difficult to deal with. But it was also very interesting. This is Tiannan, Li Tianlan said calmly. So, Wang Shengxiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you want to get out of here, or do you want me to ask you to get out? Li Tianlan asked. Wang Shengxiao was stunned, and then he laughed. Obviously, he didn't expect Li Tianlan to say that. His smile was full of surprise. This is not your character. Li Tianlan might not be very familiar with Wang Shengxiao, but as a pursuer it was impossible for Wang Shengxiao not to study Li Tianlan. What was Li Tianlan's character? It was the simplest. He came to Emperor Dong's palace from Beihai and even made a move, breaking into his bedroom. He wanted to rob Ruthless, and Wu You even pierced his heart. Under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan would never let it go like this. But now it sounded like, as long as he left Tiannan, everything would be fine. Are you in a bad state now? You need to adjust or? Wang Shengxiao said thoughtfully, speculating the reason for Li Tianlan's concession. In his view, this was Li Tianlan's concession. I need to think. Li Tianlan frowned. You're not leaving? From Beihai to Tiannan, Wang Shengxiao sighed softly. I really came from afar. I came for Xianyuan Feng. You know very well. Before the final battle broke out, you knew very well that this is the key to Beihai's future foothold. Li Tianlan didn't wait for him to finish. He simply nodded and said slowly, if you don't leave. He raised his palm hesitantly again, but his voice was extremely firm. Then don't leave. Boom. The world suddenly shook. Colorful sword light burst out of Li Tianlan's palm in an instant. The messy light flew around, and Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly in front of Wang Shengxiao. He punched. Li Tianlan's figure became completely blurred. After the breakthrough, his speed became faster. As he moved, Li Tianlan's body completely pulled out dozens of residual shadows. A large number of residual shadows had not disappeared, and the sound of countless punches and kicks had suddenly sounded. In the next second, the colorful sword light, which broke out first but arrived a step later than Li Tianlan, completely drowned the two figures in it. The sky above Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful sword light. In the messy light and shadow, the two figures directly collided in the most direct way. Two different kinds of sword energy madly entangled and fought, and the incomparably loud dragon roar echoed in the sky. In an instant, one of the figures directly turned into fragments all over the sky. A large number of fragments turned into streams of light. The streams of light turned into Wang Shengxiao one after another. The sword energy kept fluctuating, and the moment countless Wang Shengxiao appeared, they merged into one again. A crisp and cold sword chime abruptly rang out between heaven and earth. High in the sky, Li Tianlan's eyes slightly narrowed. A snow-white stream of light had appeared in Wang Shengxiao's hand. The light was extremely heavy, but so flexible. Firmament. This was the giant sword that Wang Shengxiao had been using since he was a child. The giant sword, which was almost taller than Wang Shengxiao, was directly pulled out of the sword energy coat. The moment the light shone, the sword with absolute explosive power had directly crossed the space and reached in front of Li Tianlan. Wang Dao sword. The sword edge kept trembling, destroying everything and moving forward. This was a kind of truly invincible momentum, unparalleled in the world, crushing everything. The extremely condensed sword energy and energy vibrated wildly. Wang Shengxiao's figure was no longer blurred. The sword energy coat covering his body was exposed in front of everyone, and his clothes were completely flying. Wang Shengxiao's eyes were cold, and his aura was rising almost endlessly and crazily. Sword energy, sword intent, sword momentum, everything reached the peak in an instant. Outbreak. It was the most thorough and continuous outbreak without any reservation. The sword light went completely out of control. Heaven and earth kept shattering in the sword light. They turned into giant swords that covered the sky one after another. There was no order. Countless phantoms of giant swords appeared in front of Li Tianlan in an instant, as if they were crazy. Wang Dao's sword was completely formed. Without any hesitation, Wang Shengxiao, who continued to break out, suddenly raised the sword. The sword momentum changed. Overbearing sword. Fierce, crazy, unreasonable, and murderous intent soared into the sky. The monstrous sword light swept everything, and countless sword lights turned into Wang Shengxiao one after another. Every Wang Shengxiao appeared next to the giant sword phantoms of Wang Dao's sword. Attack, attack, attack. Without any pause, countless Wang Shengxiao and countless giant swords attacked Li Tianlan at the same time. He did not retreat. Li Tianlan's body stiffened for a moment. The rainbow-colored sword light quickly retracted. The next second, everyone heard a sharp sound that seemed to tear the world apart. Li Tianlan seemed to have turned into an extremely pure sword light in an instant. All the way forward, penetrating everything. The colorful sword light streaked across the sky with a long streamline. It shattered, and disappeared. Wherever the sword light passed, the giant sword phantoms and Wang Shengxiao were torn into extremely messy sword energy at the same time. Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword light, kept accelerating, getting faster and faster. A large number of giant swords disappeared almost at the same time. The sword light moved forward. It kept moving forward. It was tough, resolute, decisive, and ruthless. The shining sword light almost broke the attack of Wang Dao sword and overbearing sword in an instant, and appeared in front of Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao did not retreat, either. The huge sword edge in the sky vibrated, and his figure instantly became illusory. The sword energy coat, which had become completely obvious, completely wrapped his body again. Wang Shengxiao held the hilt with both hands. In the blink of an eye, he also turned into a sword light. Rush forward. No compromise, no retreat. Indomitable forward, the extreme outbreak. The surging sword light and energy burned almost endlessly, rushing to the colorful light in the sky. Heavenly Sword. Chapter 1053. The two beams of sword light approached each other with the same determination and strength. Heaven and earth had become completely chaotic at this moment. Colorful and dazzling, Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword, moved from top to bottom. Everywhere he passed, the sky and the earth were filled with all kinds of light. It was incomparably bright and incomparably fierce. Every color and every ray of light was a different sword energy, majestic and chaotic, but perfectly integrated together. Countless sword intents turned into the purest sword light. This was no longer the 24 moves of sword. At this moment, this light was the purest swordsmanship. The colorful light kept refracting. Wang Shengxiao, however, rushed up from below. Blurred. Everything was blurred. It was a blurry and chaotic state. It was neither resplendent nor gorgeous. It was like a transparent flame that burned everything in its surroundings. His body rushed up. With his original combat power as the center, everything completely evaporated in the blurred light and shadow. The blurred sword light, which seemed to be able to burn everything, continued to accelerate and burst out. The air, space, and even the colorful sword light in all directions were all burned into nothingness. The surging colorful light spread again, and completely covered all the buildings in Emperor Dong's palace. The moment the sword energy covered Emperor Dong's palace, the two beams of light, one above and one below, collided with each other in an extremely fierce manner. It was not the loud sound of gold and iron colliding. The moment the sword light collided, there was a dull sound like a fist hitting a fist. Breaking, boiling, chaotic and erupting. The incomparably sharp colorful sword light directly tore the transparent flame that seemed to be able to burn everything at the moment of contact. The flame-like sword light shot out in all directions in an extremely messy manner. The sword energy went completely wild with unimaginable destructive power. In the incomparably bright and shining light, Li Tianlan's palm suddenly turned over. The invisible shock wave of their collision shattered the space and swept toward all the buildings and people in Emperor Dong's palace. The next second, the colorful light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly lit up. Few people could notice this momentary change. But the few thunder-shocking realm experts in Emperor Dong's palace were keenly aware of all this. In the crowd, the military counselor's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. The seemingly endless colorful sword light covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace, including everyone, every tree, every blade of grass, and every drop of water. It was soft, tough, and peaceful. The transparent sword light that was torn apart by Li Tianlan flew wildly. For ordinary people, the aftermath was absolutely destructive. The impact of the collision between the two spread everywhere. The messy transparent sword light and the shock wave swept through the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. including everyone in the Emperor Dong's palace. The shining colorful sword light fluctuated slightly, and a large number of colorful ripples suddenly appeared in the air. However, nothing in the entire Emperor Dong's palace was damaged or changed by the shock wave. This was definitely not something that sword chi could do. Sword chi and sword intent that focused on attacking could indeed play a protective role at times, but it could not be so perfect. As Li Tianlan turned his hand, the colorful sword light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly became a domain. And it was an incomparably perfect and pure domain. Everyone was a little confused, including Li Tianlan himself. Li Tianlan didn't know why it was like this. He just felt that he could do it, but he didn't know why. In the crowd, only Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian watched all this silently and didn't speak. They didn't recognize the so-called four realms of martial arts in Miracle City at all. The chi-controlling, ice-condensing, fire-flaming, thunder-shocking realm sounded like it, but in fact it was specious. As for the invincible realm, it was even more ridiculous. The division between sword chi and domain was completely correct, but also completely wrong. Different ways of thinking would touch different truths, and all cognition would inevitably be limited. Domain sword chi, everything was actually the most basic thing, energy. Pure energy. Different changes of energy would have different manifestations, such as sword chi and domain. But in essence it was the same. It was energy. The so-called martial arts, and even higher levels, different paths, all had a more accurate adjective. Xianyuan Wushang knew that Li Tianlan would be confused, but he didn't dare to say and couldn't say the words that could only be perceived by Li Tianlan himself. Authority. Xianyuan Wushang watched quietly. The completely transparent but burning sword light was broken into countless pieces, flying messily over Emperor Dong's palace. The dense sword light turned into a domain in the blink of an eye. Li Tianlan paused for a moment. Without hesitation. In the twinkling of an eye, the completely messy transparent sword light suddenly changed. The deceiving Taoist sword. Wang Shengxiao's figure was completely invisible. The entire space of Emperor Dong's palace seemed to be completely burning, blurring. The messy flying transparent sword chi and the burning space had completely merged into one, and it was difficult to distinguish them from each other. Wang Shengxiao completely completed the most perfect concealment while retreating. The sword light surged violently. The burning space was also surging. Heaven and earth seemed to be moving, but also seemed to be completely different. Li Tianlan, who was surrounded by the colorful sword light, suddenly tightened his body. The sword light was like a tide, spreading in an instant, mighty and mighty. In an instant, the completely violent but illusory transparent sword light rushed toward Li Tianlan from all kinds of weird and tricky angles. Front and back, left and right, up and down. Endless attacks came from every unimaginable angle. It was hard to predict and impossible to guard against. The essence of Beihai's swordsmanship was indeed an outbreak. The swordsmanship of Beihai emphasized momentum, but it didn't mean that their swordsmanship didn't have corresponding changes and dexterity. As a super family that had represented the pinnacle of swordsmanship in the dark world for hundreds of years, Beihai's swordsmanship itself was flawless. The deceitful Taoist sword sounded like only one move, but it was the pinnacle of the swordsmanship skills of the Wang family of Beihai. It was unpredictable and peerlessly bizarre, like a violent storm that was impossible to guard against. The sword light surged and vibrated. The colorful sword light held up for a moment with Li Tianlan as the center, and turned into a colorful halo. The halo was completely torn apart by the transparent sword energy in an instant. The absolutely abundant energy tore apart Li Tianlan's sword energy defense, and countless attacks fell on Xianyuan Feng's black windbreaker in an instant. Aggressive and oppressive, Wang Shengxiao, who had enough strength to support him, seemed to be a completely different person. He was strong, determined, and decisive. His every move and every sword strike carried a touch of madness that was no less than Li Tianlan's. The indistinct sword light instantly brought about an incomparably violent storm. The transparent sword light kept flying and shuttling around the whole Emperor Dong's palace, with distinct layers and more tricky angles of attack. The sword energy cut through the windbreaker, hair and face. Li Tianlan's face was directly cut by the sword energy, leaving a shocking wound. Blood flowed out. The wound healed instantly. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, and the colorful sword light around him suddenly turned. The colorful light that covered the whole Emperor Dong's palace instantly shrank toward Li Tianlan. The light swept everything, and all the transparent sword light shuttling from all directions was swept and pressed toward Li Tianlan in an instant. The sword light completely turned into a domain. The domain that contained all the transparent sword light shrank completely, and the whole battlefield was shrunk in an instant. Wang Shengxiao might not be a threat, but his current situation was a little tricky. His sword energy and Wang Tianzong's were of the same origin, which was the result of being influenced since childhood. During the half a year on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Shengxiao would be completely baptized by Wang Tianzong's sword energy every night. Now Wang Shengxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were almost completely compatible, and worryless energy was the strongest catalyst and fusing agent. It merged with Wang Tianzong's sword energy and became a coat that covered Wang Shengxiao. In this state, fighting with Wang Shengxiao was equivalent to fighting with Wang Tianzong directly. After all, as the energy core, Worryless could completely bear the sword energy of the Chosen One. It was even more suitable as a pure energy body than Xianyuan Feng. The sword energy of the father and son was infinitely compatible, but after all, it was not completely compatible. Even so, Wang Shengxiao's real combat capability at this time had reached the real peak, and he was only half a step away from Wang Tianzong in the period of Mormonts. Before Wang Shengxiao's sword energy and worryless energy were used up, he was almost equal to the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou state before the final breakthrough after fighting with tribulation. This state was undoubtedly stronger than Li Tianlan's state before the breakthrough. Li Tianlan had just broken through and needed to familiarize himself with it, while Wang Shengxiao could continue to make his sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy more compatible. What did this mean? It meant that as long as worryless energy was not used up, it could always replenish Wang Tianzong's sword energy. Then, when Wang Shengxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were completely compatible, Wang Shengxiao could fully exert Wang Tianzong's peak strength when he was in Mormonts. In other words, this was the true strength of a supreme heavens chosen. Wang Shengxiao's path was completely clear from today on. He only needed to make his sword intent fit Wang Tianzong. There was no bottleneck, and the road in front of him could directly reach that supreme level. Li Tianlan's sword intent had been perfect, and there was no bottleneck. As long as he had time, he could also reach the supreme level. What both sides needed was time. Who would be faster? This step meant too many things. It was not only the advance and retreat between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai, but also the life and death between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. Even Li Tianlan himself did not expect that an opponent he had left far behind would force him to the point where he could only race against time overnight. This was the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was also because of Wang Shengxiao's personal talent and efforts. This step between the two was extremely important. But it was not important. Realizing this, Li Tianlan was more determined. Wang Shengxiao might not have wanted to kill him at first, because of the delicate relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. But this so-called delicate relationship, no matter who took that step first, would be completely broken. In this case, what was the point of maintaining it now? Wang Shengxiao might have concerns. But Li Tianlan, who had broken through to the invincible realm and really stood on the threshold of the Chosen One, had no concerns. Kill. Such a Wang Shengxiao, such a deceitful Taoist sword. If it were in the past, it would be difficult for him to deal with. But the moment the sword energy turned into the domain, everything became clear. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly became sharp, and the colorful light gathering toward him from all directions became brighter and brighter. The domain kept shrinking, and the battlefield between the two shrank rapidly. Countless transparent sword chi were particularly bright in the domain that was completely covered by the colorful light, and a large number of sword lights were being forced to gather. 1, 2, 3, countless sword lights gathered together in the domain that was constantly shrinking. Sword of Emperor Path. There was no thinking or hesitation at all. The moment when all the sword lights were about to gather, the sword momentum of the deceitful Taoist sword instantly changed. Wang Shengxiao's figure reappeared, and the huge sword edge of firmament had already pierced Li Tianlan's chest. It was really unimaginably determined and strong. Wang Shengxiao's sword intent had been changing, smart, determined, decisive, and confident. He had always followed Li Tianlan's fighting rhythm and never fell behind. Sort of emperor path. Sovereign descent. Li Tianlan had also studied this. One sword. Among the 6 paths of reincarnation of the Wang family of Beihai, this was the simplest sword. It was also the sword that looked the most similar to Sword of Emperor Path, but it was different. It could even be said that they were completely different. Sword of Emperor Path emphasized momentum, but Sword of Emperor Path sought simplicity. The simplest straight stab, the strongest explosion, the shortest distance, and the fastest speed. The simplest ones were often the ones that had been tempered thousands of times. The huge sword edge of firmament flashed with cold light. The sword and the figure instantly became extremely clear, simple, and ordinary. The sword edge went straight. Every time this seemingly simple sword trembled, it carried with it an extremely heavy sharpness and killing intent. This sword couldn't be avoided. Even Li Tianlan couldn't avoid it. The sword edge tore the air, crossed the distance, and the moment the heavy sword tip was fixed on the black windbreaker, Li Tianlan stretched out his hands. He put his hands together, and the sword light shone. A strong and violent force burst out from Li Tianlan's hands. There was a sudden wild sound between heaven and earth. Blood gushed from Li Tianlan's hands, and the huge and heavy sword edge of firmament suddenly broke into 2 pieces. The moment the blood beads and the sword edge shone in the air, Wang Shengxiao let go of the sword hilt, put his fingers together like a sword, and pointed directly at Li Tianlan. The distance between the two narrowed in an instant. Attack. Wang Shengxiao had been attacking. He not only kept up with Li Tianlan's rhythm, but also tried to suppress Li Tianlan's rhythm. Li Tianlan had never experienced such a feeling in his life, except in the practice with Li Honghe. Wang Shengxiao's fingers even became completely transparent at this moment. The mighty sword energy gathered at his fingertips with extreme power and speed. His sword intent was of the same origin as Wang Tianzong's. At this time, the sword energy on him was supreme. Worryless energy was extremely abundant. Even in terms of his own physique, Wang Shengxiao also had the innate wind and thunder veins. Wang Shengxiao had never been bad. Even though Li Tianlan had risen so fast, Wang Shengxiao, who had always kept a low profile, had always been regarded as one of the top experts of the younger generation. Now, with the appearance of the sword energy coat, all his shortcomings seemed to be completely made up. His own physique, his own vision, his own fighting art, everything seemed to be completely perfect. There was no firmament in his hands, but at this time, this sword was the closest to perfection. The holy sword. Calm, majestic, deep and lofty. The sword energy and sword intent merged. The sword intent merged with the sword light. The sword light merged with the energy, and the energy merged with the sword energy. In an instant, Wang Shengxiao's whole body became a sharp light that seemed to be able to split the world. The distance between the two was too close. The moment the sharp light rose, the irresistible sword intent of the holy sword appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. At such a close distance, Li Tianlan punched Wang Shengxiao's arm hard without hesitation. Their arms collided fiercely, and the sword energy soared into the sky. The second before the holy sword was about to explode, Wang Shengxiao, who had his fingers together like a sword, suddenly loosened his palm. His palm slightly deviated under Li Tianlan's fist, but in an instant he stretched forward and suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's clothes. Li Tianlan's clothes. What were Li Tianlan's clothes now? It was ruthless. It was Xian Yuanfeng, who had just absorbed a small part of worryless energy, but had not recovered yet. Wang Shengxiao had never forgotten his purpose. Li Tianlan was very strong, completely stronger than he had expected. In Wang Shengxiao's estimation, Li Tianlan's combat capability should be weaker than it was now. He came to Tiannan to take Xian Yuanfeng because he had speculated that Li Tianlan was very likely to be seriously injured, but he had also been prepared for Li Tianlan not to be injured. He thought that his current strength should be stronger than Li Tianlan's. But when he saw Li Tianlan, he knew that it was not the case at all. Not to mention anything else, Wang Shengxiao could not figure out Li Tianlan's second heart. He had thought that his strength was already stronger than Li Tianlan's. As long as worryless merged with ruthless, he would not have to worry about Emperor Dong's palace in the future. Even if Wang Tianzong could not recover in the next few years, with the combination of worryless and ruthless, the Wang family of Beihai would have the peak combat capability. Or if Wang Tianzong's injury recovered, or if his sword intent and his father's sword energy were perfectly integrated, then there was no need to be afraid of Li Tianlan. He felt that he was stronger than Li Tianlan, and the speed of merging sword energy should be faster. It would not be too late to deal with Emperor Dong's palace then. But now Li Tianlan, he seemed to have broken through? The two seemed to have stood at the same starting point, and looked at the same end. Li Tianlan had the intention to kill Wang Shengxiao. When Wang Shengxiao realized this, how could he not have the intention to kill Li Tianlan? But no matter what, his main target was still Wu Qing. If he could get ruthless today, the battle with Li Tianlan might not have to happen today. He suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's collar with his outstretched hand. The moment the mighty sword energy suddenly broke out, Wang Shengxiao suddenly raised his head. In his sight, he saw Li Tianlan's extremely calm and indifferent face. Calm, resolute and calm. He did not retreat, give way, dodge or avoid. Li Tianlan raised his palm. A strong uneasiness instantly enveloped Wang Shengxiao. There was no hesitation, no time to think. He suddenly loosened his grip on Xian Yuanfeng's collar. The incomparably majestic sword light suddenly broke out in his hand, burning everything. Wang Shengxiao's whole body seemed to be completely burning at this moment. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword. Chapter 1054. There was no transition. The stalemate in everyone's eyes seemed to be completely broken in the blink of an eye. Sword light filled the sky above Emperor Dong's palace. The moment Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao got closer, Wang Shengxiao loosened his grip on Xian Yuanfeng's collar. With unprecedented determination and madness, Wang Shengxiao completely burst out all his sword energy and energy. It was a kind of determination to die if he couldn't win. Staking everything on one throw was the most extreme madness. He was risking his life. It didn't matter whether the situation had reached this point or not. What mattered was that Wang Shengxiao didn't retreat at all. Burning. Breaking out. Without hesitation. Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation. The most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. The peak of martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai. The intertwining sword intent suddenly burst out in Wang Shengxiao's hands. Light and shadow intertwined. A deafening buzz suddenly rang out in the chaotic and blurry world. The empty air, the messy light, the violent airflow, and everything in the world seemed to have sharp edges at this moment. They were sharp, radiating in all directions, yet surging with unparalleled power. Wang Shengxiao's body didn't change, but the moment the endless sword energy burned around him, his figure seemed to expand endlessly, occupying the whole Emperor Dong's palace and the whole world. In a trance, Wang Shengxiao's open palm instantly closed. Forward punch. The distance between him and Li Tianlan was too close. The distance between their palms was even closer. Just a few centimeters away. The fist with all the sword energy and energy burst smashed over, and the space between them suddenly broke. Wang Shengxiao's fist hit Li Tianlan's palm hard. The sword energy roared. Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation was the combination of the 6 moves of the Wang family of Beihai. The abundant sword energy and energy supported Wang Shengxiao's physical strength and will, and the sword energy kept blooming. The unparalleled Sword of King Path. The extremely complicated and simple Sword of Emperor Path. The indomitable Sword of Dominating Way. The extremely weird Sword of Mysterious Way. The irresistible Sword of Heavenly Path. The majestic and peaceful Sword of Holy Path. The sword energy rotated and grew endlessly. The buzzing sound of the sword energy between heaven and earth had instantly turned into an ear-piercing howl. The two figures, entangled in sword chi, collided wildly and rose rapidly into the sky. The sword chi became more and more violent. All the sword light left the ground of Emperor Dong's palace at the same time and bloomed in the air. 7 colored sword lights filled the sky. The sky was constantly being devoured by the burning sword chi. Chaos, whistling, and collision. The sky was filled with dazzling brilliance that shot through the air without restraint. Who will win? On the ground, two voices rang out almost at the same time. One was gentle, while the other was heavy. Military advisor. Xingtian. As soon as the words left their mouths, they were stunned at the same time and subconsciously looked at each other. Isn't that obvious? The same two voices gave the same answer at the same time. All of them sounded extremely confident. Qin Weibai and Xianyuan Wushang froze at the same time and looked at each other. Military counselor stood beside Qin Weibai. Xing Tian stood beside Xianyuan Wushang. However, the distance between them was not far, so the four of them looked like they were standing together. The exact same question, the exact same answer. Qin Weibai might have been blindly confident, but Xianyuan Wushang was reasonable. Xing Tian hesitated and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He couldn't say that he had completely seen through Li Tianlan's breakthrough, but at least he had some understanding. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan's breakthrough could not be regarded as a breakthrough in martial arts, but it could not be said that it was not. To be precise, Li Tianlan's breakthrough was from the power level of Miracle City to another angle, an angle of the power level of space-time corridor. This was undoubtedly a very obvious and absolutely strong transformation. However, because of the lack of a lot of information, Li Tianlan was now in a state of uncertainty. This state greatly limited Li Tianlan's performance. Obviously, he was not in his peak state. In this case, Li Tianlan's strength had naturally improved compared to before the breakthrough, but there were too many things that he needed to explore and was not clear about. So for now, this kind of combat strength improvement was actually relatively limited. This was the problem of upper and lower limits. If the upper limit of Li Tianlan after the breakthrough was 10, then in this state, Li Tianlan was probably standing at the end of the lower limit. It might be 3, 2, or even 1. The key to this reason was the lack of information. Wang Shengxiao, on the other hand, was completely different. He also had a lack of information, but he didn't know about it at all, so he didn't have any doubts in his heart. Whether Wang Tianzong's path was correct or not, at least he had reached a certain limit and end. The sword qi controlled worryless energy, and Wang Shengxiao controlled the sword qi. Wang Shengxiao might not have broken through, but in this complete state, his realm was equivalent to infinitely close to that supreme realm. In this respect, his realm was higher than Li Tianlan, who had just entered the invincible realm. You think so? You're exaggerating. As if knowing what Xing Tian was thinking, Xianyuan Wushang said calmly, Wang Shengxiao's realm is very high, but how high can it be? He has his own foundation. It's not so much that his realm is high, but that the sword qi and Wuyo's realm are high. Now he looks perfect, but there are gaps in the combination and utilization of each other. So strictly speaking, even if Wang Shengxiao's current realm is higher than his brother's, it's not much higher. No matter when has my brother ever lost a battle with someone at the same level or slightly higher than him? The so-called stalemate right now is all fake. Fake. Qin Weibai looked at Xianyuan Wushang and asked. My brother didn't do his best. Xianyuan Wushang laughed. Tianlan is not a person who will hide his strength. Qin Weibai shook her head. Look around. Xianyuan Wushang said. They looked around at the same time. They were surrounded by the grass and trees of Emperor Dong's palace. In the extremely fierce and even destructive battle, Emperor Dong's palace was still intact. Although it could not be said to be unscathed, the damage was almost negligible. In their line of sight, wisps of colorful sword light were shining from everywhere. As Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao rose into the air, they rushed into the sky at the same time. Not doing his best was not hiding his strength. It was because Li Tianlan had put some of his attention elsewhere during the battle. After the battlefield left Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan was really unscrupulous. Qin Weibai looked up at the sky. Everyone looked up at the sky at the same time. Xianyuan Wushang watched quietly and suddenly said, It's very interesting, he said softly. What? Xing Tian and military counselor asked at the same time. In the sky. Xianyuan Wushang said. Qin Weibai's brows furrowed slightly. The sun hung high in the sky above them. The sunlight covering the earth looked extremely blurry in the spreading sword light. The transparent burning sword energy was getting more and more violent. Wang Shengxiao continued to break out. His aura kept rising, and he became crazier and more terrifying. The extremely dazzling seven-colored sword light was still shining. It was colorful. The battle might be extremely fierce. But the scene looked extremely beautiful and dreamy. Qin Weibai watched quietly. At this moment, she didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to feel that all the light in the colorful sky seemed to dim quietly for a moment. Chapter 1055. Almost no one noticed the abnormality in the sky. Or it could be said that the abnormality was too weak. Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful lights, protecting all the domains. Countless domains, big and small, began to change the moment Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao rushed into the sky. The light turned into pure energy, and the energy turned into sword energy in the shortest time. The sword energy rose into the sky, quietly, faster and faster. The sky was full of dazzling brilliance. The sky was full of bright colors. However, this incomparably resplendent color was gradually becoming more intense. It was a very subtle change, but it was the simplest truth. The darker the sky was, the brighter the light was. What did this mean? Qin Weibai was a little confused. She subconsciously glanced at Xianyuan Wushang. Xianyuan Wushang kept his head up. Among all the people, perhaps except Li Tianlan, only Xianyuan Wushang and Qin Weibai noticed the change in the sky. Even Wang Shengxiao didn't notice it. All he noticed was that Li Tianlan's sword energy was getting stronger. After leaving the range of Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan's combat capability almost improved a lot when he was in the air where he couldn't destroy the palace. The situation that seemed to be evenly matched gradually tilted towards one side. The transparent sword light was burning with colorful energy, and the colorful energy turned into sword light to extinguish the flame with a wave of Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan became more and more determined. He let go of his scruples and kept increasing his strength. Sword energy, strength, speed, willpower, everything began to be absolutely concentrated. Wang Shengxiao clearly felt the suppression. This feeling of suppression gradually became more and more obvious, as if it was going to completely swallow him. Li Tianlan still had doubts deep in his eyes, but that confusion gradually began to disappear. In his eyes, Wang Shengxiao saw that he was thinking. It was very obvious. The sword energy roared and flew high in the sky. Wang Shengxiao's figure seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. 6 different kinds of sword energy constantly blended together. Their figures were getting higher and higher. The transparent sword light that burned everything was like a storm high in the sky, constantly expanding and completely enveloping the core of the battlefield. The storm began to shrink. A large piece of colorful sword light was torn apart. The outermost bright light collided with the edge of the storm and formed a stalemate. The center of the storm began to approach the two. Between heaven and earth, every space was filled with incredible sharpness. The scales that had already tipped over seemed to be pushed back bit by bit. This was the first time Wang Shengxiao had used the complete 6 paths of reincarnation sword. With his own realm, without the help of Wang Tianzong's sword energy, he couldn't even use the complete holy sword, let alone the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. He was very familiar, but also very unfamiliar. Therefore, there was still a gap in the most extreme eruption. However, with the improvement of his combat capability, even if there was a gap in his 6 paths of reincarnation sword, Li Tianlan could do nothing about it. However, Wang Shengxiao also knew this, so he didn't try to make up for the gap. Thus, the sword qi continued to circulate in the sky, and its power continued to increase, gradually approaching the peak of its power. If Wang Tianzong performed this move himself, there would be no process at all. At the moment when the two of them rushed to the sky, the 6 paths of reincarnation sword with the most extreme power would directly explode in the sky. But Wang Shengxiao needed time. This was a big difference, but it wasn't that big of a difference for the current battle. The 6 different sword lights became more condensed and sharp. Li Tianlan's suppression of Wang Shengxiao gradually disappeared. The storm raged high in the sky, and the whole sky seemed to become an extremely vague and transparent huge whirlpool at this moment. The edge of the whirlpool spread outward, but the core kept shrinking. The inner and outer layers. The whole whirlpool gradually formed a natural circle, and every arc of the whirlpool was extremely awe-inspiring. Suppression. Attack. At this moment, Wang Shengxiao even vaguely showed signs of suppressing Li Tianlan. More than 2 years. Even in the hundreds of years of the Dark World. If not counting the eternal sword above Mormons that ended Wang Tianzong's life, today's battle could almost be said to be the peak battle in the Dark World for hundreds of years. Wang Shengxiao's attack became more and more violent and domineering. The storm of sword energy whistled and rotated. His voice was calm and dignified. I can give you one last chance. Give me Xianyuan Feng, and I can let you go today. Condescending. This posture was so dignified, but it was so natural. Li Tianlan, who had been thinking about something silently and dealing with Wang Shengxiao's attack, laughed when he heard this. Are you talking to me? Maybe you still don't understand your current situation. Wang Shengxiao's voice was flat and piercingly cold. Maybe you have a new breakthrough now, but you can't block this sword. I can give up the current sword energy, and part of Wuyo's energy. But after this sword breaks out, I can only give up these at most, but I won't be hurt. The chance of you escaping unscathed is equal to 0. Do you still want to persist? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and remained silent. The colorful light all over his body kept flying. Countless rays of light began to slow down and become sticky. The sky seemed to become darker. 6 paths of reincarnation is nothing more than this. Li Tianlan said blandly. Wang Shengxiao's eyes suddenly became sharp for a moment. In that case, go to hell. Crack. An extremely clear sound suddenly rang out in the sky. Sword of Wangdao, sword of deceit, sword of hegemony, sword of emperor path, sword of heavenly path, and sword of holy path. The 6 sword chis seemed to have completely merged together in the incomparably huge storm vortex. Wang Shengxiao suddenly straightened his body. The sword energy of the chosen one burned wildly, and Wuyo's energy began to pour out without reservation. The huge vortex of sword energy seemed to be completely still at this moment. It was not static. The vortex was rotating so fast that it looked like it was motionless. Boom. The loud noise was earth-shattering. It exploded. The monstrous sword energy completely exploded at this moment. The indescribable sharpness swept across the air in an unstoppable manner. Space, airflow, sword light, and sharpness went forward. Everything was silently annihilated. The colorful sword light was swallowed and disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye. There was no room for resistance. The blazing sword light continued to expand, growing and multiplying endlessly, ceaselessly reincarnating without end. The burning sword light occupied the sky. The colorful light was getting less and less. 6 paths of reincarnation. This was the pinnacle of the Wang family of Beihai's swordsmanship for hundreds of years. It was also the pinnacle of the Dark World swordsmanship for hundreds of years. In terms of swordsmanship, even the Li family's 24 moves of sword seemed to be a little less sharp than 6 paths of reincarnation. Today's Wang Shengxiao was infinitely close to perfection. This move of 6 paths of reincarnation was also infinitely close to perfection. The sword light was mighty above the sky. Wang Shengxiao, whose aura instantly became weak, watched the colorful sword light being swallowed by the burning sword energy, and Li Tianlan being completely shrouded by the endless sword light. Do you regret it? He said in a hoarse voice. Xianyuan Feng is still mine. Li Tianlan raised his palm. The sword light seemed to be completely swallowing him in the next second. His voice resounded between heaven and earth. I still have one move. Are you afraid? What? Wang Shengxiao sneered. Li Tianlan's voice sounded with boundless coldness, calm and indifferent. Break of reincarnation. 24 moves of sword. Break of reincarnation. The last move of 24 moves of sword was also an unfinished move. It was also the move that the war god used to restrain 6 paths of reincarnation. This move was not complete in the Li family. It was not complete in the Lin clan either. But this move was complete in the sky, very complete. Whoosh, an extremely sharp whistling sound suddenly rang out in the sky. All the colorful sword light did not disappear, nor was it swallowed. All the sword light completely changed the situation in an instant. The dazzling 7-colored light completely disappeared. All the sword light suddenly turned pure black. It was black, not dark. The pure and extreme black sword light suddenly burst out with Li Tianlan as the center. It was mighty, like a black ocean. The surging black ocean completely broke the sword energy storm of 6 paths of reincarnation. Li Tianlan's figure turned into every drop of water in the black ocean. Every drop of water also turned into Li Tianlan. The ocean surged and destroyed everything. Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly beside Wang Shengxiao. His fingertips, which were condensed with thick black color, slowly touched Wang Shengxiao's sword energy coat. Boom! In the loud bang, the sword energy coat on Wang Shengxiao suddenly burst into pieces. Countless energy and sword energy became completely scattered. Chapter 1056. No words could describe Wang Shengxiao's feelings at this moment. Shock, astonishment, disbelief, despair, and a myriad of other emotions that even he couldn't describe. The dazzling 7-colored sword light that shone in the sky turned into the purest black in an instant. The darkness surged and spread out. At this moment, it was as if a black ocean had suddenly appeared in the sky. It was vast and mighty, but extremely quiet. It was like eternal silence and coldness. This was the purest black. It rose and fell between heaven and earth. And even the shadows were completely contained in it. The sword energy was like the sea, tearing the sky, the sword light, and the burning flame. Li Tianlan's figure was everywhere. He was infinitely close to Wang Shengxiao, but infinitely far away. His whole person seemed to have completely become this black ocean. And he could appear in any corner at will. His fingertips touched Wang Shengxiao's sword energy coat. It was neither fast nor slow, but it was impossible to dodge. The sword energy that had completely turned black appeared in front of Wang Shengxiao, occupying his whole world. It was the ultimate shattering and destruction. Heaven and earth withered, and everything turned into ashes. Nothing could continue to exist in this kind of sharpness. This sword seemed to be incomplete in Li Tianlan's hands, but it was already the most complete sword move. 24 moves of sword break of reincarnation. Everything was forcibly suppressed. It was even completely crushed in an instant. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword, which Wang Shengxiao was not very familiar with, had countless flaws in this black ocean. The black ocean wrapped all the light and rushed forward. The 6 seemingly perfect and endless sword energy were suddenly completely torn into individuals. Li Tianlan's finger touched Wang Shengxiao's chest. Worryless energy and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were constantly turbulent, fragmented, and quickly separated. He lost. The ending was so clear. The sword energy coat clinging to his body was constantly broken. In the surging sword light, Li Tianlan's aura suddenly weakened, but Wang Shengxiao's aura almost fell to the bottom in an instant. The surging black ocean occupied the sky, blocking everyone's sight. The boundless black sword energy tore Wang Shengxiao's sword energy coat. Li Tianlan's eyes were firm and sharp. Broken reincarnation. This was not a sudden flash of inspiration that allowed him to complete this move of the absolute sword. Instead, it was a vague thought. It was not until he really converged all the light, and the black sword chi sea was completely formed that he could be sure that the vague sword chi he felt in the sky above Mount Dibbing in North Sea was the break of reincarnation. He tried to imitate it, but it was completely beyond his abilities. Even though he had broken through again, and obtained the second one, this heart was still unable to imitate even 1/10,000th of that sword's charm. However, in that instant of imitation, he still managed to grasp some things in the end. These things became inspirations and ideas, constantly shining in his heart at the moment of his breakthrough. This time, Li Tianlan stopped imitating. Under the circumstances where his abilities allowed it, he tried to use this sword. Compared with the sword in the sky, the power of this sword seemed to be countless times weaker, but it was just what Li Tianlan could bear. This sword directly tore apart the most imperfect part of Wang Shengxiao's 6 paths of reincarnation. The outcome had been decided. With victory and defeat, there would be life and death. Li Tianlan did not hesitate. The overwhelming black sword chi shook with a loud bang. The sharp edge spread all over the sky and rushed to the sword chi coat on Wang Shengxiao. That was the armor of the combination of worryless energy and the chosen one's sword chi. Strictly speaking, as long as this coat was not completely destroyed, Wang Shengxiao, wrapped in it, would not be hurt no matter what he faced. For Li Tianlan, today Wang Shengxiao took a shortcut with the help of the foundation of North Sea, but he had become his biggest threat. If he let him go this time, Wang Shengxiao would be more difficult to deal with next time. So kill. Go all out. The black sword light shook wildly, rolling up huge waves in the sea. The darkness continued to spread and absorb the sunlight. There was only the purest black and a faint light blue on the battlefield. Light blue? Li Tianlan was stunned. He suddenly felt that this scene was a little familiar. Wang Shengxiao was also stunned. Now he had no way to stop Li Tianlan's killing move. After all, he was a little too careless. If he hadn't consumed the sword qi in Kanglin, he might have had the power to fight against Li Tianlan now. But now, at least before returning to Mount Dibbing to replenish his energy and sword qi, he had no way. Li Tianlan could not let him go. So the only thing Wang Shengxiao could do was to wait for death. When his coat was broken, the black sword light would completely crush him into powder. But that faint blue, Wang Shengxiao was sure that it was not his sword qi. He was also sure that it was not Li Tianlan's sword qi. The faint blue appeared so abruptly in the absolute darkness. It seemed to be harmless, but at this moment, both Wang Shengxiao and Li Tianlan felt extremely uncomfortable. Wang Shengxiao was panic-stricken, and Li Tianlan was disgusted. Without a sound, the faint blue color in the darkness suddenly extended and spread. The familiar feeling deepened in an instant. In Li Tianlan's sight, there was only a little blue light extending and becoming a virtual heartbeat. The lines spread rapidly. The lines spread rapidly. The black sword qi still existed. But at this moment, outside the sword qi, everything in the world seemed to become illusory. Outside the sword qi, the sunlight, the white clouds, the air, the wind, everything turned into a string of constantly flowing data. The world became virtual. All the distance disappeared completely. An incomparably blurry virtual figure was constantly outlined in the virtual world, becoming clearer and clearer, more and more real. He appeared in the black sword qi and appeared in front of Wang Shengxiao. What Li Tianlan saw was only the extremely deep and bright eyes in the other party's incomparably solemn eyes. All the virtual lines disappeared completely. The world was completely restored to reality. The figure of the man with double pupils was still a little vague, and stood in front of Wang Shengxiao. The black ocean surged and drowned everything. The uninvited guest raised his palm without hesitation. Heaven and earth shook. The world instantly turned into night. The same black. The same sword qi. The moment the man with double pupils raised his hand, he used exactly the same unique skill as Li Tianlan. 24 moves of sword break of reincarnation. The sword light kept blooming in his hand. At the same time, the man with double pupils pulled Wang Shengxiao. The world became virtual once again. Li Tianlan realized something in an instant. The moment the two black oceans collided, Li Tianlan, whose aura had gradually become weak, raised his palm again. The sword light swirled wildly between heaven and earth. The man with double pupils seemed to have expected it. His figure became more and more illusory without looking back. This is Wang Shengxiao, who saw the scene clearly, suddenly narrowed his eyes for a moment. The sword light, which seemed to burn everything, burst with a loud bang with Li Tianlan as the center, touching Wang Shengxiao and the man with double pupils. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. Li Tianlan. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword that belonged to Li Tianlan. This sentence was so incongruous, but it was so true. Sword of king path, sword of deceitful path, sword of hegemony path, sword of emperor path, sword of heavenly path, and sword of holy path. The same 6 swords. Different from Wang Shengxiao. The 6 sword lights took shape in an instant, and then suddenly rose to the extreme in the next second. There was no brewing process. In an instant, the extreme broke out. Boom. The incomparably wild sword light tore the black ocean of sword qi in an instant, and swept over the figures of the man with double pupils and Wang Shengxiao. The figures of the two had become blurred. The sword light swept over, and their bodies shook for a moment at the same time. The next second, the virtual lines spread quickly. The figures of the two suddenly disappeared. Chapter 1057. The virtual light blue lines were dotted with white dots. Everything was digitized the moment it was enveloped by the light. The faint light burst out from a point and spread in all directions. The light faded the white clouds and sunlight in the sky and outlined the shape of a door. Two completely virtual figures fell out of the door and stumbled. One of them knelt on one knee, and the other almost fell to the ground. Cough, cough, cough. Blood kept flowing out of Wang Shengxiao's mouth along with coughing. The moment when the sword energy coat was constantly pulled and deformed and torn might have been very short, only less than 1/10 of a second, but the pervasive sword energy still left extremely serious injuries inside and outside his body. In addition, it was the first time he had experienced such an incredible virtual travel. The moment he returned to the real world, he was extremely embarrassed. Wang Shengxiao crushed a button on his body with trembling hands and swallowed the powder mixed with his blood. He put his hands on the ground and gasped for breath. Lin Shi, who was kneeling on one knee, also coughed up a cloud of blood, but his breath completely stabilized at once. The scorching sun shone unscrupulously in the endless grassland. He slowly straightened his body and sized up his surroundings. A bit further away, the apostle and saint were currently rushing over with quick steps. It's safe here. Lin Shi looked down at Wang Shengxiao and reached out to him. His Majesty won't chase us here. Wang Shengxiao hesitated for a moment. Although the other party had saved his life, Wang Shengxiao was very sure that he did not know the other party after careful observation. There was no such thing as unwarranted kindness in this world. Any seemingly unrequited kindness meant that he would have to pay a greater price to repay it in the future. He took a deep breath, held Lin Shi's hand, and stood up. He was vigilant, but he did not show it on the surface. You saved me. Don't worry about it, Lin Shi said with a smile. Wang Shengxiao looked around and was in a trance. They seemed to be in the center of a grassland, but this grassland was a little too big. With Wang Shengxiao's eyesight, he could not see the end of the grassland. About 1,000 meters away, there was a blurry black and white color, and they were in groups. Zebras? Wang Shengxiao was a little stunned. It seemed to be a huge group of zebras. This was a safari park? Was there such a large-scale wildlife park in Tiannan? Not to mention the safari park, it was not easy to find such a large piece of flat grassland in Tiannan, which was mostly mountainous and not much developed. Wang Shengxiao was not sure about the details of Tiannan, but he was sure that there should be no wildlife parks around Xianyuan City. This plan could only be carried out after 3 years. So Wang Shengxiao carefully recalled the magical shuttling just now. Lin Shi pulled him into a door, and then opened another door. The whole process only took a few seconds. Had they left Li Tianlan's sword Qi in such a short time? Left Emperor Dong's palace? Left Xianyuan City? How was this possible? Wang Shengxiao thought silently, recalling where the nearest safari park was from Xianyuan City. He asked subconsciously, where is this? Africa. Lin Shi said softly. To be exact, it's West Africa. His voice was indifferent. Cough, 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 cough. Wang Shengxiao couldn't catch his breath and instantly coughed violently. Blood flowed out of his mouth again, which was shocking. But Wang Shengxiao didn't care about this at all. He raised his head and looked at Lin Shi dumbfounded. In a hurry, the Mandarin in his mouth suddenly turned into the northeastern dialect of Beihai with a little foreign emphasis. What the hell are you talking about? We're in West Africa, so we're very safe here. His Majesty can't catch up with us here. Calm down, don't get excited. Lin Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao. The smile on his face disappeared, and his whole person became very calm. This extremely outstanding appearance of the 11th prince of the war god realm was really like his father. He was not very domineering, but not as gentle as Jade. Most of the time he was calm and even had no characteristics, but it was impossible to ignore him. Africa. West Africa. Wang Shengxiao murmured to himself and shook his head hard. Apostle and Saint trotted over. Your Highness, how are you? Apostle looked solemn, but Saint was as if facing a formidable enemy. She even raised her palm subconsciously, and a thick white light flashed in her hand. Li Tianlan. They were still very unfamiliar with this identity and this name. The Li Tianlan they knew was completely different from the current Li Tianlan. No matter how short the fight between Lin Shi and him was, it was enough to make people's scalps tingle, and they didn't dare to be careless. Your Highness. Wang Shengxiao subconsciously caught this sensitive word, and his mind became more and more confused. I'm fine. Lin Shi shook his head and gestured to Wang Shengxiao. His injury is more serious. Saint raised her palm without any hesitation. An incomparably dazzling milky white beam of light suddenly burst out from her hand and enveloped Wang Shengxiao. A warm feeling instantly enveloped Wang Shengxiao's whole body. Then it was beyond him. It was a repair within the scope of common sense. The external wound healed quickly. The incomparably pure and soft energy went deep into his internal organs, healing all the injuries. The speed of blood flow in his body continued to accelerate, and his cells seemed to be rapidly proliferating, regaining their activity. In a flash, Wang Shengxiao's injury had completely recovered. Wang Shengxiao stood there quietly, feeling the changes in his body. All these changes should make him ecstatic. But a strong sense of uneasiness and chill kept rising from his bones, almost freezing his soul. He didn't know what it meant. Not knowing was what scared him the most. Who the hell are you? Wang Shengxiao looked at Wang Shengxiao and asked seriously. In just a few seconds, Lin Shi had traveled thousands of kilometers from Tiannan to Africa. Regardless of whether it was true or not, it was impossible for the middle-aged woman beside Lin Shi to completely heal his injuries with a single move. In fact, it was beyond everyone's knowledge. My name is Lin Shi. Lin Shi introduced himself again. One of the branches of the Lin clan. We have lost contact with the headquarters of the Lin clan many years ago. Now we are the most down-and-out branch of the Lin clan, right? The most down-and-out? Wang Shengxiao raised his eyebrows. Yes. Lin Shi nodded naturally. In our branch, there are only 3 of us here now. Even the family headquarters has to be relocated. Isn't this down-and-out enough? I don't think so. Wang Shengxiao shook his head calmly. With your ability, no one will think that you are the most down-and-out branch of the Lin clan. It doesn't matter what others think. Lin Shi said blandly. As long as you don't think so, it means that we have the basis for cooperation. Cooperation? Wang Shengxiao was stunned. Of course it's cooperation. Lin Shi said slowly. Otherwise, why would I save you? Wang Shengxiao thought quickly in his mind and said cautiously, what kind of cooperation are you going to do? It's about dealing with His Majesty Li Tianlan. Lin Shi said seriously, but his words sounded extremely awkward to Wang Shengxiao. Deal with Li Tianlan? Then we are enemies? But what about the sincere respect and awe in your words? Deal with Emperor Dong's palace? Wang Shengxiao said to himself. No, it's against His Majesty Li Tianlan, and only against His Majesty Li Tianlan. Lin Shi said slowly, I will re-edit my identity. Now I need a position that can stand opposite to His Majesty. Chapter 1058. Wang Shengxiao found it hard to understand the logic of Lin Shi's words for a moment. However, he could still understand the simplest and most obvious meaning. This seemingly inexplicable and mysterious guy, who was indeed very powerful, was going to stand on the opposite side of Li Tianlan. He needed such a position. This position might not be the basis for his cooperation with the Wang family of Beihai, but with this position and his strength, everything could be discussed. Wang Shengxiao pondered for a while. In today's battle with Li Tianlan, both sides had probably exposed the limits of their combat strength, which was equivalent to falling out with each other. When both sides were only one step away from that supreme realm, or even half a step away, was the tacit understanding between them that they had not made it clear, but had decided to break the balance after the breakthrough to settle the score was still there. Wang Shengxiao was not sure. After all, he could not be completely sure of the current strength of Emperor Dong's palace, and the specific development in the next few years. But in terms of the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, if he and Wang Tianzong's sword energy completely matched and reached that supreme level, plus the foundation of Beihai, overall, he no longer needed to help Emperor Dong's palace. Even now, if he had a chance to kill Li Tianlan, he would not hold back. What about Li Tianlan? Wang Shengxiao nodded and then shook his head. Anyway, Now if someone wanted to stand with him to fight against Li Tianlan, he would welcome it. The premise was that the other party really stood on the same side as him. Do you have a grudge against Li Tianlan? Wang Shengxiao asked. No. Lin Shi shook his head slightly. In fact, although the current His Majesty is different from the His Majesty I know, in essence, he has always been one of the people I admire the most. He deserves everyone's respect. I mean everyone. Wang Shengxiao looked at Lin Shi strangely. He held back the words that were on the tip of his tongue, but he did not say them in the end. In fact, he really wanted to ask him, "Little brother, did you recite the wrong lines?" He swallowed the words, but he laughed sarcastically. In that case, why do you choose to stand on my side to fight against the person you admire the most? I'm just on my side. Lin Shi seriously confirmed his position and then continued. In order to continue to grow, in a sense, you can think of it as challenging the strong for your own improvement. This statement wasn't completely accurate, but it was absolutely reasonable. Right now Li Tianlan was not a strong man in his eyes. But if the environment was limited here, he was indeed no match for Li Tianlan. How to become Li Tianlan's opponent? This was what Lin Shi wanted to do this time, and it was also his way of growth. Wang Shengxiao looked at Lin Shi expressionlessly, and did not speak for a long time. Time passed slowly in silence. After some time he suddenly asked, "Is this really Africa?" While Wang Shengxiao was silent, Lin Shi had been quietly looking at the endless grassland in the distance. When he heard Wang Shengxiao's words, he nodded. This place is less than 200 kilometers away from Lagos. If you want, I can take you there to verify it. The apostle at the side suddenly waved his hand. A metal ball about the size of a ping-pong ball suddenly appeared in his hand. The incomparably smooth metal ball shone with a soft luster under the sunlight, seemingly without the slightest gap. The apostle threw the metal ball in his hand into the air. The next second, an incomparably clear roar suddenly rang in Wang Shengxiao's ears. The metal ball kept vibrating in the air, replacing and reassembling itself. Its mass was increasing rapidly, and the ball kept expanding, getting bigger and bigger, becoming more and more irregular. Almost in the blink of an eye, the round ball's shape completely changed. It had 4 limbs, and the arc on the surface of the ball was completely flattened. It was as if there was a blade constantly sliding on the huge metal, and the disintegrated metal pieces became different shapes and rearranged themselves. Wang Shengxiao looked at this scene in a daze, unable to speak anymore. Right in front of him, the extremely small metal ball directly turned into a metal giant more than 10 meters tall. It was not an ordinary metal humanoid creation. The metal giant in front of him had sharp edges and clear body lines. It had intelligent facial features, and its body was also covered in metal armor. A large amount of liquid metal kept flowing on its body, adjusting every part of its body. When all the adjustments were completed, the huge metal giant closed its mouth and silently knelt in front of the apostle. Wang Shengxiao looked at the silent giant. He was once very familiar with this giant. He had seen this giant countless times in different situations. His mind seemed to have become incomparably chaotic at this moment. All types of worlds intertwined in his mind, becoming a mess. Permanently preserved on the bookshelf, recorded reading history. The apostle casually waved his hand. The body of the huge metal giant kneeling in front of him quickly changed. Its body gradually shrunk, but its structure became more and more compact, its entire body giving off an incomparably tough and fierce feeling. Wang Shengxiao watched as the metal giant, in just a few short seconds, turned into an extra-large 7-seater off-road vehicle. An enormous off-road vehicle of a model he had never seen before. That made sense. How could he have fucking seen this so-called model before? The atmosphere became completely silent. Lin Shi was silent for a while. He looked at the off-road vehicle, which was extremely unsightly in his eyes, and laughed self-mockingly. Look, the 3 of us look like 3 acrobats, don't we? The mockery and self-mockery in his smile were extremely obvious. However, Wang Shengxiao didn't think too much about it. He was also looking at the car in front of him. This car was very unfamiliar to him, but the image of the metal giant just now was extremely familiar to him. Taking a deep breath, he looked at the apostle and slowly asked, Megatron? The apostle was stunned. He quickly entered the Miracle Cities network based on Wang Shengxiao's 3 keywords, and then he laughed. If you like him, he can also become that Optimus Prime. Alright, this is a joke. This is Skyhunter's shadow, my first child. As for the Megatron you mentioned, it does look a bit like him. But this is just a coincidence. The apostle said as he reached out his hand. Get in the car. We can set off for Lagos now. Lagos, the capital of Nigeria, the largest economy on the continent. Wang Shengxiao silently walked into the car, his mind becoming more and more chaotic. A huge impact kept striking his mind, and for a moment he didn't even know what to say. Or rather, he wanted to say too many things, but he didn't know how to start. You have a lot of doubts. Lin Shi sat in the car, looked at Wang Shengxiao, and said quietly. Yes. Wang Shengxiao nodded, then shook his head. He took a deep breath, looked at Lin Shi and slowly said, I think we should have a good talk. Chapter 1059. The mighty, overbearing, and somewhat ostentatious huge off-road vehicle was driving on the vast grassland. The interior of the car was extremely spacious. It was even abnormally spacious beyond the surface area of the vehicle itself. The soft and delicate leather sofa was extremely comfortable. Wang Shengxiao and Lin Shi sat face to face. A little farther away, a light curtain full of the aura of the future was suspended in front of the apostle. A large number of pictures were rolling on the light curtain. The apostle looked at them with great interest, as if he was understanding something. Saint, who was not outstanding in appearance but had an extremely quiet and gentle temperament, sat elegantly on the other side, looking down at a very thick book. The sunlight occasionally flowed on the branches and leaves. Wang Shengxiao occasionally glanced at it, only to find that it was full of symbols that he didn't recognize. The vehicle moved forward steadily, but there was no driver. Not to mention a driver, this vehicle didn't even have a cab. The entire interior space of the vehicle had been thoroughly transformed. Lin Shi sat on the sofa very relaxed. In front of him was a device similar to a laptop. At this time, he collected the information one by one and placed them on the screen of the laptop. You can have a look at all of these. In the silence, Lin Shi suddenly spoke. He handed the laptop in his hand to Wang Shengxiao and said in a calm voice. Wang Shengxiao, who was silently thinking about something, was stunned and subconsciously took the laptop. The densely packed documents almost took up the entire screen. The screen was divided into 3 small screens. The title above the first small screen was Emperor Dong's Palace. The title above the second small screen was the Wang family of Beihai, and the title on the third screen was a question mark. Wang Shengxiao glanced at Lin Shi with some doubts. The current database of Emperor Dong's Palace has been protected by the quantum network. For some reason, we can't crack it or invade it, but... No, wait a minute. Wang Shengxiao looked up at Lin Shi with a confused face. Quantum network? Lin Shi said yes. This answer was too brief and affirmative, which annoyed Wang Shengxiao. Where is the quantum network? Quantum network. Wang Shengxiao was no stranger to this term. Beihai's biological research level was at the top of the world, but its advantages in other aspects were not obvious. It could even be said that it was at a disadvantage in many fields. But even at a disadvantage, Beihai still did not give up on some high-end scientific fields. Quantum network was also a research topic in Beihai, and it was one of the most cutting-edge topics. How advanced was it? In Beihai, this research project was only a small team. It was so cutting-edge that Beihai didn't even have the energy to invest in it. Therefore, this was just a research project. There wasn't even a laboratory. During the decisive battle in the North Sea, Chen Fongqing immediately used his authority to block all the communication signals in the North Sea. As a result, the North Sea suffered great losses as soon as the battle began. At that time, the scientists in the North Sea had said what would happen if this so-called quantum network existed. But this is only if. It was the if of North Sea. It was also the world's if. At present, no country in the world had a real quantum network, and it was foreseeable that it would be impossible for a long time to come. The so-called quantum network was just a theory, and the research in this area had just begun. How could Emperor Dong's palace have the so-called quantum network? Wang Shengxiao felt like an idiot, but because of some doubts he had to ask, what is a quantum network? He felt that he and Lin Shi had a different understanding of certain terms. Maybe the quantum network that Lin Shi was talking about was the internet that everyone knew? This might sound nonsensical, but it was the most likely scenario. Lin Shi glanced at the apostle. The apostle, who was currently researching something in front of his own light screen, looked at Wang Shengxiao and laughed. I've investigated the progress of some large countries' research on quantum networks. From certain aspects, they are correct. At the very least, the most basic theory is correct. The key to opening the quantum network is the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. When two microscopic particles are on opposite sides of the universe, no matter how far apart they are, as long as the two particles are quantum entangled, by changing the quantum state of one particle, the state of the other particle that is very far away can also be changed. The signal can transcend the barriers of space and time, and directly reach the other particle. However, due to some special reasons, the understanding of some special things by the quantum scientists here has deviated, so it is very difficult for them to solve basic problems, such as the so-called uncertainty principle. As the apostle spoke, his smile became more and more obvious. The fragile nature of quantum particles makes it very difficult for them to solve the problem of information loss. The solution they have proposed and experimented with can't be said to be wrong, but it is very clumsy. It's like they can reach out and get something, but there is a wall in front of them that they can't break at all. The thing is right there, but if they want to get it, they have to take a detour, and they have to walk around the earth to get to the other end. Judging from their current progress, they can only achieve short-distance information transmission with a single node at most. Strictly speaking, that can't even be regarded as a real quantum network. Wang Shengxiao looked at the apostle silently and then at Lin Shi. So there is no real quantum network on Earth. So where does the quantum network come from in Emperor Dong's palace? Let me correct you. The apostle looked at Lin Shi, who had been silent, and continued. I'm not telling you that there is no quantum network here. I'm just saying that your quantum science has just started, and quantum scientists haven't developed a quantum network, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. In fact, there are countless quantum nodes and quantum network base stations here, and Beihai has just fully enjoyed the convenience brought by them. For example? Wang Shengxiao asked very calmly. For example, East Island. The apostle said, for example, the silence of East Island in the final battle. From your point of view, it's because Xianyuan Wushang hacked into the network system of East Island with technology, and controlled all the communication signals and weapons control rights of the whole East Island. But in fact, he's not good at this. Maybe he has similar equipment, but he can't do it so flawlessly. Strictly speaking, he activated the nodes of the quantum network, let the quantum network cover the whole East Island, replaced the internet of East Island, and intercepted and tampered with a lot of information. That's why the weapon system of East Island was completely silent. In fact, East Island didn't know the real situation until the end of the final battle. Before the end of the final battle, they always thought that they had the upper hand in the final battle of Beihai. Xianyuan Wushang? Wang Shengxiao raised his eyebrows. A big shot. The apostle answered without hesitation. Even in our eyes, he's a big shot second only to His Majesty and Her Highness Qin Weibai. He's the fat man you saw in Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Shengxiao didn't dwell on this. He just asked, does Beihai's quantum network technology come from Xianyuan Wushang? He's a doctor like me, but he doesn't have the ability in this area. Saint, who was flipping through the book, said softly. He should have done it with some tools. What he's done now is just to protect the database of Emperor Dong's palace. He has no way to invade it again. What about you? Wang Shengxiao turned to look at the apostle. He saw the metal ball that the apostle threw casually turn into Megatron, with his own eyes. He saw some light screens floating around him, and he saw a lot of data flowing on the light screens. Wang Shengxiao couldn't understand what it was for a moment, but the inexplicable sense of technology was obvious. Quantum network was undoubtedly also technology, and it was the technology fantasy of most countries. Then what about the apostle? The apostle was silent for a long time, and then he smiled bitterly. I'm a good-for-nothing now, or as His Highness said, a juggler. His smile was extremely bitter, and there was a touch of suppressed anger in it. A good-for-nothing? No, of course not a good-for-nothing. They followed Lin Shi from the God of War's realm to the territory of the space-time corridor. Although there were only 2 people, they were personally chosen by the God of War. Whether they were apostles or saints, they could be said to be big figures in the entire God of War's realm. Lin Shi, apostle and saint. The 3 of them were at the same level, but they had completely different focuses. Saint was a doctor, and his frontal combat ability was not outstanding. Lin Shi was good at frontal attacks, and he would face Li Tianlan head-on, until he died or Li Tianlan left here. Under normal circumstances, the combination of these 2 people was enough. Apostle. Only the apostle. His arrival was not only to strengthen this small team, but also to some extent to cover up and prevent some of the worst situations. Although he and Lin Shi were at the same level, in terms of pure destructive power and comprehensive combat ability in all aspects, the apostle had an absolute advantage. Under normal circumstances, the 3 of them could have directly used the apostle's ability to stand firm the moment they chose a place to stay. Why did they need to cooperate with Wang Shengxiao? The relationship between the God of War's realm and the Emperor Palace? This was the reason why Lin Shi covered up the Wang family of Beihai. But it was definitely not the reason for their cooperation. But who could have thought that the moment they entered Miracle City, they encountered an accident that no one, including the God of War, expected? The Princess Royal of the space-time corridor stood in front of them. Her warnings might not be obvious, but all of them were aimed at the apostle, and it could even be said that she completely blocked the apostle's firepower. Just like the off-road vehicle they were riding in now. Even Sky Hunter before he transformed. He looked mighty and domineering, but what was the use? Not to mention the planetary level or even stellar level weapons like the Dark Matter Star Destroyer cannon. Even the most basic weapon system on Sky Hunter had been put away. The off-road vehicle seemed to be speeding on the grassland, but in fact, Sky Hunter's thinking center was conveying the feeling of protest to him every minute and second. But what could he do? The apostle was completely sure that as long as he dared to show the true form of Sky Hunter, he didn't even need to do anything, and the killing intent from the Princess Royal would appear immediately. At that time, not to mention him, even Lin Shi and Saint would not be able to escape. That Princess Royal even showed a posture of not hesitating to fight with the God of War here. What could he say? What else did he dare to say? He could only hold it in. So now he could only modify such an off-road vehicle, and could only use the quantum network to bring Wang Shengxiao and Lin Shi from Tiannan to West Africa. He couldn't make any aggressive posture. This thing looked fancy, but actually could not hurt anyone. If it wasn't like a piece of trash who played juggling, what was it? Now he was just hiding and slacking the whole time. Unless Lin Shi and Saint were desperate, it would be difficult for them to gain a foothold here in a short time. Looking for Wang Shengxiao and cooperating with the Wang family of Beihai was the best way. He can provide us with some confidential information we need, Lin Shi said. Lin Shi said. He did not deny the value of an apostle, but now it seemed that this was his greatest value. For example, what you see. Wang Shengxiao subconsciously looked down at the notebook in his hand again. It's impossible for us to break through the network protection of Emperor Dong's palace now, so we can't get in touch with their core database. But some things can always be investigated from another angle. Lin Shi said blandly, starting from the Flourishing Age Fund, we investigated certain interactions between all partners of the Flourishing Age Fund and other enterprises, and found some very interesting things and a lot of secret agreements. I can tell you with certainty that the scale of the Appreciation Fund is not what it looks like now. The strength of the Flourishing Age Fund is much more terrifying than what it shows now. The military counselor is not just in finance. Specifically, in Zhongzhou State, among the listed groups that many of us have heard of, nearly 30 of them are secretly controlled by the Flourishing Age Fund, and they are completely controlled. The multiple investments seem complicated, but in the final analysis, they all come from different directions of the Flourishing Age Fund. The 30 large listed groups are involved in energy, insurance, healthcare, internet, real estate, transportation, aviation, media, automobiles, international trade, machinery manufacturing, electronic communications, and even military fields. They are everywhere. The 30 groups that are secretly controlled by the Flourishing Age Fund are also constantly investing in some small and medium-sized groups. Just within Zhongzhou State, the Flourishing Age Fund has formed a very complicated multi-industry industrial chain, which covers the 6 major groups. Even many people, including the bosses of some small and medium-sized groups, don't necessarily know that their big boss is the Flourishing Age Fund. This force is extremely complicated, and it's hard for us to sort it out in a short period of time. But what is certain is that once this force breaks out, the impact will be unimaginable. Countless fields are constantly radiating in Zhongzhou State, using money as the most basic driving force, absorbing, and even creating everything they need. Stars, scholars, officials, elites of various industries, money converge, and resources are used interchangeably. Everyone is pursuing a kind of interest or a kind of goal. Everyone has different goals. The more money, the bigger the circle, and the wider the members. Your needs are completely easy for another person in the circle, and his needs are also solved by another person. Exchange, mutual assistance, as long as it's a reasonable need, there's nothing that can't be solved. If there really is, then people who can solve the problem will be pulled into this circle again. Lin Shi's voice suddenly paused. He looked up at Wang Shengxiao and asked with burning eyes, "What do you think it is like?" Society. Wang Shengxiao, whose face had already changed, said in a dry voice, "A micro, no small society. And it's a capital-oriented society. When this society develops to a certain extent, almost no one can refuse its pull. At the beginning, it needs a lot of wealth, but this wealth begins to be injected into different things with the expansion of the circle. The more factors are injected, the crazier and crazier the expansion will be, and more concealing. Those who are drawn in may not need money, but they may need power, fame, beauty, and many other things. There will always be something they need. As long as they accept this need, they will naturally enter this circle in order to get more of what they need, and their own existence will become the needs of others. Society needs transactions, order, social strata, and capital. The first to join this circle are those who have already gained benefits. They bring capital and get benefits, and they will continue to maintain this stability, so they form order and form the initial social strata. People keep coming in, transactions keep happening. The social strata become more and more obvious, and the order becomes more and more stable. Everyone in this circle gets the benefits they want because they pay something they can give. Pay and get back. Everything looks very fair, and there are no traps, because it's the huge capital that maintains all this. The Flourishing Age Fund has become the person who controls most of the capital in this small society. Everyone here is not his confidant or subordinate, but they can all become his capital and his pawns. Some of them may notice it or they may not, but it doesn't matter, because in such a more and more stable order, even if they are used, they can get back. A loose, invisible, but incomparably huge and lively small society that is almost impossible to destroy. Lin Shi quietly concluded, "It's not a genius idea, but the initial construction must be extremely difficult, and it takes a lot of effort. For this alone, Her Highness Qin Weibai is amazing, very amazing, because this system can be applied to almost any form of society. It's like a knife. It may not be sharp, but it's everywhere. In this small society, everyone can be regarded as the peripheral forces of Emperor Dong's palace, and they can be regarded as the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace. As time goes by, this society becomes more and more stable. The next development of Emperor Dong's palace is beyond Beihai's imagination. Beihai seemed to have such a plan hundreds of years ago, but it was detected and stopped by Zhongzhou State, and now, Lin Shi did not continue. But Wang Shengxiao knew very well what he was going to say. It was too late. Everything was too late. When this small society developed to this point, it was meaningless to stop it. Before the final battle of Beihai, there might be room for all this. But with the victory of the final battle of Beihai, the Prince Group was about to be suppressed in all aspects, and even the Special Warfare Group was facing the risk of falling apart. The rise of the new group was equivalent to Emperor Dong's palace bringing a part of this small society from the invisible state to everyone. And when the whole small society was exposed, Wang Shengxiao suddenly froze. You've thought of it. Lin Shi laughed. When this small society completely appears in front of everyone, Emperor Dong's palace will become another Beihai province. And it will be in a state more cohesive than Beihai province. It will be absolutely stable, and His Majesty will be absolutely powerful. What does this mean? What did it mean? Everything was very clear. In that case, Emperor Dong's palace would no longer need Beihai. At that time, Zhongzhou state would no longer need Beihai, because in the face of such a Emperor Dong's palace, checks and balances were meaningless, because there was no way to do so. Emperor Dong's palace would completely crush Beihai, crush it, and swallow it. Zhongzhou state would adapt to it, because in that state, Emperor Dong's palace would be very similar to Beihai. It would look like Beihai had changed its surname from Wang to Li, and moved from Beihai to Tiannan. Everything would come naturally. When Her Highness Qin Weibai made this plan, it was not because she couldn't think of a better way to imitate Beihai. On the contrary, I think she wanted to naturally replace you. Lin Shi said slowly. Wild ambition. Wild ambition. Wang Shengxiao's face was livid. I haven't finished yet. Lin Shi's voice was disturbing. This is only a part of Zhongzhou state. It turns out that the Flourishing Age Fund has also invested a lot overseas in recent years. They are also secret investments, which means that Emperor Dong's palace also hides a very powerful force overseas. The so-called Flourishing Age Fund is like an iceberg on the sea. What everyone sees is just the tip of the iceberg. Wang Shengxiao looked down at the documents on the screen. Just opening a few folders, his face had become completely gloomy. Emperor Dong's palace is not the only one with worse news. Lin Shi said slowly. We can't underestimate Jiang Shangyu. A piercingly cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. This could even be said to be one of his main tasks here. But this task was not a request of the War God Realm, but a clear request of the War God Realm by the space-time corridor. Anything that seemed inconceivable and incomprehensible was just because the level was not high enough. From the perspective of the War God Realm and the space-time corridor, they could use the most scientific way to explain Qin Weibai's rebirth, space-time travel and parallel universe. They knew very well why Qin Weibai's rebirth. But Jiang Shangyu's rebirth was an unexpected variable. Jiang Shangyu had the possibility of being reborn. Everyone had the possibility of being reborn. However, the probability, even if theoretically explained, was so small that it almost didn't exist. Even if this small and negligible probability really happened to Jiang Shangyu shouldn't have appeared here. He should have appeared in the miracle city that belonged to the God of War's realm, and was separated by the God of War. It was obviously unusual for him to appear here. But the space-time corridor had always been very cautious about this matter, and did not probe too much. This now became Lin Shi's task. How to investigate something without intense probing was the most difficult. The simplest way that Lin Shi could think of was to kill Jiang Shangyu directly. But if Jiang Shangyu really had something worth probing, then it was obviously not easy to kill him. The cooperation between Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu is unlikely to be broken up at this stage. If your sword energy coat gathers again, you are currently stronger than either of them. But if they join forces, it will also be extremely troublesome for you. The Purgatory of Heaven capital is very strong, so is the Knights Templars. Moreover, there seems to be an interesting old guy in the Holy Land. If they stand together, they can still build a very terrifying joint force. Compared with the joint forces, Beihai does not have much advantage, but at least it is not a disadvantage, so Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai joint forces. You, His Majesty Li Tianlan Jiang Shangyu. You will be the focus of the dark world. I can't say that the Wang family of Beihai will inevitably be destroyed, but if you want to deal with the current situation, your pressure will undoubtedly be greater. You need my help. I need a clear position. This is the basis of our cooperation. Three-party struggle for hegemony. It sounds a bit like the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Who can defeat the heroes in the world? Chaolu? The apostle, who had been learning about all aspects of information, laughed. A son should be like Sun Zhongmo. Lin Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao with a smile. What do you think? Think. Wang Shengxiao did not. He just felt the pressure. The incomparably huge pressure once again completely enveloped his whole body. How do you want to cooperate? Wang Shengxiao asked slowly after a long silence. After a pause, he changed his approach. Or what do you need? Everything. It was logical and expected. Lin Shi smiled and made a request that seemed to be demanding an exorbitant price. I need everything, money, talents, intelligence. Connections, everything, I need them. Wang Shengxiao looked at Lin Shi expressionlessly. The apostle kindly reminded him. The Wang family of Beihai seems to have a good army on the Afro-continent. Wang Shengxiao's facial muscles suddenly twitched. The Divine Martial Army. This was a super army that had been passed down in Beihai for hundreds of years. It had always been one of the most powerful forces on the Afro-continent. Its history even predated the history of Beihai province. It was an army of more than 400,000 soldiers. Perhaps the overall quality of the Divine Martial Army was not as good as that of the Beihai Corps and the Border Control Corps, but this kind of super-large army could be said to be a trump card anywhere. Beihai had always attached great importance to the Divine Martial Army. For many years, whether it was armaments, logistics, or personnel treatment, they were all very top-notch. Such a super-large integrated army was synonymous with invincibility on the Afro-continent. Yes. Lin Shi nodded and said, that army is good. You want the Divine Martial Army? The question in Wang Shengxiao's tone was extremely strong. Yes and no. Lin Shi said flatly, we want the Divine Martial Army, but it's not just the Divine Martial Army. A Divine Martial Army and more? Do we have to give you half of Beihai before we are satisfied? Wang Shengxiao was so angry that he laughed. What about you? What can you give Beihai? Saint closed the book and looked at Wang Shengxiao. We can help you treat your father, Wang Tianzong. Chapter 1060. Heal Wang Tianzong. For the Wang family of Beihai, just a few simple words contained a fatal attraction. However, Wang Shengxiao seemed to have experienced too many accidents today, so even if he heard that the other party could help him heal his father, his expression didn't change much. He just raised his eyelids and glanced at Lin Shi. Lin Shi calmly changed Saint's statement and said with a smile, to be exact, we can help you heal your father, Wang Tianzong. Heal. Heal. These were two completely different concepts. Wang Shengxiao's body finally moved. He looked at Lin Shi and asked, how long do you need? In 5 years at least and 10 years at most, we can guarantee that the Sword Emperor's injury will be completely healed. Lin Shi's voice was clear and light, but it was with absolute confidence. In fact, it was not difficult to heal Wang Tianzong, but it was definitely not easy either. Wang Tianzong's injury was not the most important thing. Although his injury seemed to be very serious, it was not a problem in the eyes of Saint. Wang Tianzong's biggest problem was the reason for his injury. The video of the Eternal Sword over Mormons could still be found in some secret channels. Lin Shi had watched that sword countless times. How amazing that sword was. Lin Shi couldn't describe it in words. It was indeed a sword, but it was equivalent to the double damage of King Guard's sword energy and the real brand. If he treated it correctly with authority, the authority of that sword had even exceeded the 5th level. For Miracle City, this was absolutely an unprecedented sword, a peak that could not be surpassed. Even if his father came here in person and tried his best, it would probably be the same. Saint could heal Wang Tianzong's internal and external injuries, but he needed a certain amount of time to carefully repair the damage caused by the real brand. Of course, this time would not be as long as 5 to 10 years. Seriously, if Saint tried his best to help Wang Tianzong stand up again, it would only take about 8 to 10 months, no more than a year at most. 5 to 10 years. This was the time that Lin Shi needed, and also the time that Lin Shi speculated that Li Tianlan needed. Not to mention Li Tianlan. The majesty that Li Tianlan represented had always been one of the most respected people in Lin Shi's life. He was also the most respected person in his father, even his grandfather, and even the entire human clan. Everyone. No one wanted to be his enemy. There was no one. Lin Shi wanted to sharpen himself with the help of His Majesty's recovery, so he had no intention of making trouble for His Majesty. In Lin Shi's estimation, with Li Tianlan's current state, it would take him about 5 to 10 years to continue to break through to the next step, and then it would take him about 10 years to reach the perfect state that everyone expected and return smoothly. At that time, it was entirely possible to cure Wang Tianzong. I know what you're thinking. Lin Shi said calmly, but your idea is wrong. There are some documents about the Wang family of Beihai in the notebook in your hand, including the plan for the new generation of immortality that we just found. The direction of this plan is correct, but in our opinion, even if you can still avoid detours in the following time, it will take at least nearly 40 years to succeed. Remember, I'm only talking about the success of the new generation of eternal life. I can tell you responsibly that the new generation of eternal life cannot completely solve the Sword Emperor's problem. It can only solve a part of it, because your current research lacks the most crucial truth. Based on the progress of your research, you might not even be able to come into contact with this point in the endless years to come. Real? Wang Shengxiao asked confusedly. Lin Shi stopped explaining. This is not a problem you should care about, he said softly. What you should care about now is the situation of the Wang family of Beihai. I don't know how much you know about Her Highness Qin Weibai. I can only say that the Her Highness everyone knows is not the one accompanying His Majesty Li Tianlan now. Although that one can't be said to be fake, the real Her Highness is now recuperating in the European land. Her state is very strange. She is in a state where she can be saved but can't be saved. And there are some things that even Xianyuan Wushang can't say. You can imagine what the situation of Beihai will be when His Majesty knows the truth. His Majesty doesn't know for now, but it doesn't mean that he won't know in the future. At least, Jiang Shangyu is very likely to tell him. Wang Shengxiao was silent. Of course he knew about Qin Weibai. It was Summer Solstice who told him. You are no match for His Majesty, so you need us. It happens that we also need the support of Beihai. I can help you resist some of the pressure, and even help you cure the Sword Emperor. What are you hesitating about? Wang Shengxiao felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Straight, it was not until he heard Lin Shi's words again that he understood what was wrong. The Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, Wang Tianzong. From beginning to end, the three people in front of him seemed to be very polite when they mentioned his father, calling him the Sword Emperor, but it was just pure politeness, without any respect. Instead, when it came to Li Tianlan, no matter who the three of them were, when they mentioned Li Tianlan, they would instinctively call him Your Majesty. Wang Shengxiao gritted his teeth subconsciously. Compared with the 400,000 troops of the Divine Martial Army, or the Sword Emperor, which one is more important in your heart? Lin Shi asked. Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath and didn't speak for a while. As a son, he would choose the latter without hesitation. But as the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, how could he answer this question? And I don't think you have any other choice now. Lin Shi continued. Beihai is far from the end of the road. Wang Shengxiao's face was cold. That's true. But if it really comes to that, our cooperation will be meaningless. Lin Shi nodded and said. Wang Shengxiao continued to be silent. After a long time he suddenly asked. You said that you are all from the Lin clan? Lin Shi froze and nodded. Sort of. Sort of? Wang Shengxiao questioned. I am a direct descendant of the Lin clan, and they are the retainers of the Lin clan. It's not wrong to say that we are from the Lin clan, but my seniority in the Lin clan seems to be a little high. Lin Shi hesitated, as if he didn't know how to express it. The god of war was the origin of the Lin clan and the god of war's realm. As the son of the god of war, his seniority. He shook his head in confusion. The Divine Martial Army. Wang Shengxiao took a deep look at Lin Shi. I can give it to you, but I have a request. Say it. Lin Shi said calmly. I need to know your origins, your specific abilities, and your specific goals. We can cooperate, and Beihai can support you, but you must show enough sincerity. You can let me rest assured of your sincerity in cooperating with you. Wang Shengxiao said seriously. Chapter 1061. The off-road vehicle went all the way forward. The atmosphere in the car was silent. Lin Shi, the apostle, and saint were all silent and did not say a word. Wang Shengxiao looked at them, and his eyes gradually became cold. I think. His voice was slow and a little cold. This is not an excessive request. His request was indeed not excessive, and it could even be said to be the most basic request. Wang Shengxiao cooperated with them in many ways. Lin Shi chose to make an exorbitant demand. He asked for more than 400,000 elite troops of the Divine Martial Army, and more than that, he also asked for money and resources. Such a price was just to support an ally. Even for the Wang family of Beihai, it was quite a crazy thing. A divine martial army represented at least a quarter of the military strength of the Wang family of Beihai. Even a fool knew what it meant. No superpower needed to use its own resources, or even spend a lot of money to support an ally. Wang Shengxiao could give them these things, because he valued the abilities of the three people. Lin Shi had already shown his strength the moment he pulled him from Tiannan to Africa. The apostle's method of making transformers was also enough to stun people. As a doctor, Saint could be called a miracle-working doctor in this era. From Tiannan to West Africa in an instant. This was a technology that surpassed countless years of this era. And even the people of this era had never thought about it. And the quantum network that was currently in the state of scientific fantasy. And so on. The Wang family of Beihai needed these technologies, which was also what Wang Shengxiao valued the most. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to cooperate with these three people. Since he valued these technologies and abilities, Wang Shengxiao naturally needed to further understand them in detail to reconfirm their value. As allies, Wang Shengxiao also needed to know where they came from and what they were going to do, and they didn't need to hide it. If they were not willing to disclose these things, then how much sincerity did they have in this so-called cooperation? This is really not an excessive request. Lin Shi was silent for a while and said slowly. So? Wang Shengxiao asked. But we can't say too much. Lin Shi said slowly, thinking, and suddenly asked, is there any war palace on Mount Dibing now? Wang Shengxiao was stunned. War palace. He was naturally familiar with this term. Anyone who knew the history of the Wang family of Beihai was familiar with it. That was the most glorious history of the Wang family of Beihai. It was also the first part of history. Beihai had a thriving population. In its hundreds of years of history, there was basically no situation in which the younger generation was alone. Even the lineal patriarchs mostly had brothers and sisters, such as Wang Shengxiao and Wang Yuetong of this generation. For example, Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao of the previous generation. When Wang Yuetong was in Beihai, she was jokingly called the little princess of Beihai. Before Wang Tianzong fell down, Wang Xiaoyao, who seemed to be ignorant and cynical most of the time, was called King Xiaoyao of Beihai. Perhaps this was a joke, but no one would deny the nobility of their status. There were many generations of princes and princesses in the history of the North Sea, and they all made important contributions to the development of the North Sea. As for the War Palace, this was the residence of the most important lord in Beihai so far in Mount Dibing. He was a lord recognized by people in several eras in the Dark World. In the hearts of Beihai people, he was a great man who could be described as great. He was the god of war recognized by everyone. He was the only name on Mount Dibing, Mount Xiaoxiong, that could be ranked with the ancestor who founded Beihai province. That was the early days of Beihai. He and the ancestor of Beihai pushed Beihai to the peak of the Dark World. After the ancestor of Beihai died, he alone guarded the Wang family of Beihai for nearly 100 years. In his era, the Wang family of Beihai, which was carried by him alone, was not afraid of any opponent, any force, any country. That was the era when Beihai was truly invincible. The war palace belonged to the god of war of the Wang family of Beihai, the god of war Lin Xinyuan. He was also the ancestor of the Lin clan, and the founder of Zhuanyuantai of the Li family. In the history of the Wang family of Beihai, he was the only Wang with a different surname. For hundreds of years, there was no second god of war in the Wang family of Beihai. But the war palace, which had always stood side by side with the emperor palace, had always stood on Mount Dibing. In the wind and rain, The Wang family of Beihai would carefully protect any damage as soon as possible, as if guarding the most important treasure. His name was engraved on stone of formidable person, ranked with the ancestors of Beihai. As long as the history of Beihai was talked about, the patriarchs of Beihai would not hesitate to praise the glory of the god of war. His spirit tablet was placed in the ancestral hall of the Wang family of Beihai and worshipped day and night. His name in Beihai province had almost become a legend that belonged to the people of Beihai. But, even when Beihai and the Lin clan gradually drifted apart and became enemies with the Li family, the glory of this name had never been covered. Wang Shengxiao's eyes dimmed slightly, and his whole body showed a touch of undisguised bitterness. But the war palace was gone. It had always existed until more than 2 years ago. But now, the entire Mount Dibing was gone. The war palace and the emperor palace were all gone. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, "It's still there. There may be some changes, but the real war palace, the real god of war, has always been in the hearts of everyone in Beihai." Lin Shi smiled. His eyes seemed to soften for a moment, and his voice was slightly relaxed. "I agree. The war palace is also in our hearts. It's hard for me to explain in detail to you when you ask about our origin, but I can tell you that we are from the god of war realm." Wang Shengxiao narrowed his eyes, hesitated, and asked, "The god of war realm?" Lin Shi said yes. "I've never heard of the name of this force." Wang Shengxiao paused and suddenly said, "A few years ago, Zhang Shangyu also set up an organization called 3,000 Realms." 3,000 Realms? A few years ago? Lin Shi's eyes suddenly flashed with an incomparably sharp killing intent. About 4 years ago? At that time, he was still studying in the Deep Sea Academy. Wang Shengxiao replied. 3,000 Realms. 3,000 Realms. Lin Shi murmured the word, and his voice became colder and colder. "It's really a name full of the style of the Shadow Camp." "What?" Wang Shengxiao asked again. "Nothing." Lin Shi gradually restrained his killing intent, and he shook his head slightly. Chapter 1062. Tell me about the war god's realm. Wang Shengxiao thought for a while, came to his senses and asked calmly, "Where is the war god's realm?" "I can't say." Lin Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao and said seriously, "I dare not say." "Dare not?" Wang Shengxiao had an obvious incomprehensible emotion. "There are some things I can't say. There are some things I dare not say. There are some things that you can't hear even if I say them." Lin Shi shook his head. "We have a lot of technologies that you don't have now. I mean you, not just the Wang family of Beihai. You can imagine as much as you want, no matter how absurd it is. We will find many things incredible, just because we don't understand them." The so-called don't understand has 2 meanings. The first is that it hasn't been discovered, so you don't understand. The second is that for some reason, you don't understand itself, which is meaningful, protection, or something else. Maybe we can use the method of elimination. When all the impossible is eliminated, the remaining answer, no matter how incredible or absurd, is the true answer. Lin Shi's voice was very soft, very slow, and very careful, as if he was testing something. There was a slight pause in every word he uttered, which sounded extremely broken. Wang Shengxiao was silent. When Lin Shi spoke, he could clearly see a touch of anger and helplessness in his eyes. The other party was obviously worried about something, so this was not a hint, but it was all he could say. But what was the other party worried about? The war god's realm. The war god's realm, you. If I say it, will there be any consequences? Wang Shengxiao asked silently. "I will die." Lin Shi's voice was very calm. "It's a real death." "Who will kill you?" Wang Shengxiao's pupils contracted slightly, and he suddenly felt that everything around him had become a little strange. Lin Shi was silent for a long time. He raised his head, looked away from Wang Shengxiao, and looked in a direction of nothingness. His expression became solemn. "Your Highness, I will take him away. This is not only the will of my father, but also the will of my grandfather." It was silent. There was no change in the surrounding space. Lin Shi's words seemed to be spoken to the air. Wang Shengxiao looked at Lin Shi strangely, full of doubts. Where is this guy taking me? Who is this so-called highness? It might not be too formal, but here, I can be his guide. Lin Shi said to himself. I'll take it that you agree. There was still no sound. Lin Shi really looked like he was talking to himself. He was a little embarrassed and a little silly. Lin Shi took a deep breath and quietly clenched his fists. Although the elder princess from the space-time corridor didn't answer, he was sure that she was looking at him. No matter how hard he tried to hypnotize himself, he couldn't get used to the feeling of being exposed to someone else's eyes. Suppressing his anger, Lin Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao thoughtfully and did not speak for a while. Guide. This sounded like a trivial identity, but in fact it was not trivial. For anyone, this was an opportunity to touch the top. Every guide had to go through countless repetitive competitions and learn a vast amount of information. How to guide a peak expert was not an easy task, especially when they had yet to realize the truth of the world. They had to know what to say, what not to say, and when to play dumb. They had to have a firm grasp of propriety. If they made the slightest mistake, they might be consigned to eternal damnation. If it was something unimportant, it wouldn't matter. At most, the person who said it would be speaking, but the other party wouldn't be able to hear their own voice, or their voice would be distorted into countless tiny syllables. However, if they really said something that they shouldn't say, then it would be death and destruction. No one could save the speaker and the listener. No one could save them. Lin Shi knew that his statement was ridiculous. The guide. For a very long time, there were only two real guides or guides in the space-time corridor and the war god's realm. It was the ninth prince Xianyuan Wushang, who came to the space-time corridor to guide His Majesty. The status of a prince of the space-time corridor was self-evident. And the guide of the war god's realm was Xianyuan Luanhui, the first disciple of the war god's realm. The war god's realm was a little worse than the space-time corridor. The first disciple of the war god's realm sounded a little worse than the ninth prince. But Xianyuan Luanhui's reputation was much better than Xianyuan Wushang's. The first disciple of the war god's realm, Xianyuan Luanhui. He was known as the first celestial master of the human clan. From the looks of it, there were only these two who could truly take on the responsibility of guiding the way. Lin Shi's self-proclaimed guide was ridiculous. And Wang Shengxiao was not qualified to be led by Lin Shi. But Lin Shi's attitude was very obvious. He used the inappropriate title of guide to express the attitude and importance of the war god's realm, and the emperor palace to Wang Shengxiao. There was silence around. Lin Shi slowly let out a breath. Feng Qingwu's existence made him almost breathless. There were some things he couldn't say, but he dared not say them because of Feng Qingwu's existence. Now that he made his position clear, he got silence from the other party. This seemed to be a tacit agreement. He thought silently, and his eyes gradually became calm. Can you say it now? Wang Shengxiao, who had been silently watching his movements, suddenly asked. Still not. Lin Shi glanced at him and said, You need to continue to grow, so I can tell you something very limited things. Continue to grow? Wang Shengxiao frowned. When you reach the peak of the Sword Emperor realm, I can tell you. Lin Shi said calmly. Wang Shengxiao fell silent. After a long time he asked inexplicably, War Palace? Lin Shi nodded solemnly. War God's realm? Wang Shengxiao asked again. Lin Shi slowly raised his head and looked at him deeply without saying a word. Crack. A subtle sound rang out without any warning. It rang in front of Wang Shengxiao. Lin Shi's expression suddenly twisted for a moment, and he looked extremely painful. Wang Shengxiao's expression suddenly changed. In his perception, Lin Shi's aura was fluctuating wildly, and the subtle sound was getting louder and louder. It was the dense sound of bones cracking. Countless bones in Lin Shi's body seemed to be broken in the blink of an eye. Your Highness, don't go too far. His Highness Shi is. The apostle's expression suddenly changed, and his eyebrows suddenly raised. An extremely bright light kept flashing in his eyes. The apostle's face was cold, and he suddenly stretched out his palm. Don't move. Lin Shi's expression changed dramatically, and he let out a low roar in a hurry. Heaven and earth suddenly stopped for a moment. The apostle raised his palm, but he seemed to have forgotten what he was going to do, and his whole body froze in place. Wang Shengxiao watched the apostle's palm turn over. But he didn't see the moment his palm turned over. An extremely dazzling cannon muzzle shining with blazing white light appeared in his palm. The energy in the muzzle was surging and boiling. The apostle's palm, which was about to move forward, turned to himself without any hesitation. The muzzle was activated, and the light shone. His palm hit his chest with a bang. The huge energy instantly shattered his heart, and the strong light penetrated through his back. The apostle's incomparably powerful aura instantly weakened, and almost disappeared completely. Bang! The huge off-road vehicle that was automatically driven suddenly fell apart, and Wang Shengxiao and the others all fell on the grass. The wreckage of the off-road vehicle rolled around. A string of data flashed slightly on the wreckage for a moment, and then it was completely silent. Wang Shengxiao, whose pupils had contracted to the extreme, turned his head subconsciously. He saw the somewhat panicked saint prostrate herself on the ground, and said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, please calm down. We can guarantee that this will not happen again. This is the last time." There was no sound. Everything stopped, as if nothing had happened. Saint was not a stunning beauty, but her every move was extremely elegant. However, at this moment, she no longer had the slightest bit of elegance. She scrambled to her feet and rushed to Lin Shi, pressing one hand on his chest. A pure and soft strong light burst out in an instant. In the light, the saint seemed to be divided into two. One stood in front of Lin Shi, and the other appeared in front of the apostle. The two beams of light rose at the same time and merged into one. A huge amount of energy continued to condense. Wang Shengxiao watched this scene silently, unable to say a word. After nearly half an hour, all the light slowly disappeared. The saint's face was pale. Half of it was because she was scared, and the other half was because she had consumed too much energy. Both Lin Shi and the apostle were seriously injured. Everything seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. But in that short period of time, all the organs in Lin Shi's body were deceived. All the organs thought that Lin Shi was in a state of breakthrough at the same time, so they desperately sent energy. At the same time, the energy that erupted almost completely destroyed Lin Shi's body. If it continued, Lin Shi would completely die in a few seconds. The apostle was even worse off. When Lin Shi was injured, he, who had been enduring all this time, was obviously going to erupt with all his strength. However, this thought of his clearly completely angered the eldest princess. As a result, his thoughts were deceived, and then his body was deceived. In that instant, his arm treated his own body as the enemy. The high-energy particle cannon in his palm almost self-destructing as it entered an overloaded state, directly firing it at himself at full force. The result was obvious. Under the high-frequency energy vibrations, all of the weapon systems in the apostle's arm that was overloaded were completely destroyed, Heaven Hunter's shadow completely dying. That overloaded cannon even pierced through one of the apostle's energy cores, his entire existence's logic even deviating. With the holy apostles around, he would not die. However, such a heavy price had caused his combat power to drop by a level. Even if his own level did not change, the current apostle had already fallen from the ranks of the top apostles to the level of a high-level apostle. If he wanted to recover, who knew how long it would take to research? The saint gasped for breath, his plump and proud chest rising and falling violently. He checked the state of the two again, and then glared at Wang Shengxiao. "Did you see that?" A somewhat weak voice sounded behind the saint. Lin Shi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said softly, "There are some things that you can't understand now, so before you understand, you can't say what you shouldn't say. This is a warning. If she wants, she can completely deceive our brains and make our brains think that we are dead. Then we don't even know how we died." This is... Wang Shengxiao tried his best to remain calm, but he was still in shock. The scene just now was so weird that he didn't even know who the enemy in the dark was. So, Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, "You have restrictions, so what can you do now?" Lin Shi was silent. After a while, he said with a bitter smile, "We don't know either." They undoubtedly knew what their abilities could do. But the problem was that they didn't know what abilities His Highness, who was watching them, allowed them to use. Wang Shengxiao looked at Lin Shi, and he could clearly see the confusion in the other's eyes. Thinking of the scene just now, Wang Shengxiao felt a little cold, which was a chill from the bone. If Wang Shengxiao frowned, he suddenly realized that if he didn't cooperate with Lin Shi and the others, would he? There is no if. Lin Shi shook his head. It's actually very simple for us to get rid of her. As long as we leave here, she won't bother to pay attention to us. Or we won't pay attention to Li Tianlan, and she won't do anything. But what about you? Can you guarantee that Beihai won't go against Emperor Dong's palace? Wang Shengxiao thought silently. After a while he slowly asked, we went from Tiannan to West Africa. What the hell is going on? Virtual shuttle. The apostle's weak voice sounded. This is my ability. He threw a metal ball into the sky again. The metal ball instantly turned into another transformer. The transformer kept changing and once again became an off-road vehicle. The apostle carefully put away the remains of Sky Hunter's shadow, and his eyes were a little dim. I can digitize an area and use the quantum network to build a transmission channel. During virtual shuttle, from a real point of view, you exist, but from an objective point of view, at that time, you are just a piece of data. West Africa and Emperor Dong's palace are two nodes. You can think of this distance as a data transmission between two nodes of the quantum network. That's why you are here. The apostle and the others sat back in the off-road vehicle and said calmly, what is certain is that I can use this ability. So in terms of escape, we have rich channels and experience. Maybe in His Highness's heart, we only deserve to escape. The corner of Wang Xingxiao's mouth twitched. He couldn't understand how a living person could become data in an instant. Did it mean that as long as the apostle wanted to, he could become data and appear anywhere in the world at will? He shook his head subconsciously, thinking of the attack he had suffered a second before the virtual shuttle. Li Tianlan. If I'm not mistaken, Li Tianlan used, Wang Shengxiao said hesitantly. He used the 6 paths of reincarnation sword at that time. Lin Shi whispered. Wang Shengxiao's body finally couldn't help shaking. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword. This was the supreme unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, and also the peak sword move in the dark world for hundreds of years. How could Li Tianlan use it? Moreover, Li Tianlan's 6 paths of reincarnation sword broke out in an instant, which showed that his mastery of this move was much better than Wang Xingxiao's. How was that possible? And what about the break of reincarnation that seemed to completely restrain the 6 paths of reincarnation sword? Did he imitate the 6 paths of reincarnation sword? Wang Shengxiao whispered to himself. The 24 moves of sword of the Li family were ever-changing. Starting from Li Kuangtu, the 24 moves of sword changed for the first time, and turned into the immortality seal. The comprehensive move of the immortality seal, 9th void and infinity, was a unique skill that could imitate the opponent's sword energy. If Li Tianlan really understood the 24 moves of sword, he would naturally be familiar with 9th void and infinity. It's not imitation. Lin Shi shook his head. That sword move is the real 6 paths of reincarnation sword. It's not imitation. At His Majesty's current level, many things are no longer a matter of whether he can do it or not, but whether he wants to do it or not. After a pause, Lin Shi whispered, maybe he has touched the truth of the world. When he said this, there was shock and admiration in his eyes that could not be concealed. Wang Shengxiao hesitated. I need to think about it. Go ahead. Lin Shi nodded. The off-road vehicle drove in silence. Lin Shi thought silently for a while and slightly grasped in the void. The empty air was instantly compressed. It turned into a pen and paper. The apostle raised his palm slightly. A piece of nanoparticles slowly formed in front of Lin Shi and turned into a desk. Lin Shi put the paper on the desk in front of him, picked up the pen, and thought silently. He began to write the first letter to the War God realm after arriving in Miracle City. He knew that this could not escape Feng Qingwu's eyes. However, he could not change things, so he could only ignore them. We have to know a premise. The incorporeal pen sketched on the incorporeal paper. Since the beginning, there has never been a person like His Majesty Li Tianlan who died and came back. So even now, for us and for the corridor of time, His Majesty's existence is just an example. We don't know what incredible changes will happen. All we can do is speculate about His Majesty's way of returning based on all other examples. But I want to say that other examples are not comparable to His Majesty, so our speculations are seriously unconvincing. Since the beginning, more than one top figure has fallen and returned, but there is only one His Majesty. Our examples show that those people can only reach level 4, 5 at most after leaving the real environment. At this level, they can't even break the corridor of time and space, let alone compare with His Majesty. When His Majesty left Miracle City, he already had the record of level 4, 7, but Emperor Xianyuan in the corridor of time and space has not been restarted. That was the first time he left corridor of time and space. I have sufficient evidence to show that His Majesty's way of returning must be an incredible return. As the founder of the neutral camp power system of the human clan, he should have a stronger status and power than Emperor Xianyuan. As the first human emperor, maybe we don't need to wait too long for his return. Maybe we have all forgotten that His Majesty handed over his power to Emperor Xianyuan. Emperor Xianyuan became the new human emperor, but strictly speaking, he still occupied the throne. Emperor, emperor, emperor. We can't be sure of the difference between these two positions for the time being, but I think there will always be a difference. The most important piece of evidence that I can state is that I can confirm that His Majesty now has the ability to touch the real world. What's even more unbelievable is that he has yet to break through to the 4th level of authority. Based on this alone, I personally believe that when His Majesty returns in the future, his authority will not be lower than the 7th level. This is a crazy speculation, but I firmly believe it. And from this point of view, I seem to be able to see His Majesty's way of returning. He can touch the real world when his authority has not reached level 4, and he can accommodate the real world in the shortest time possible. There is only one such way, and the name of the level 7 authority on this way is called Heaven's End. Maybe this is His Majesty's way of returning. Chapter 1063. The virtual lines that filled the sky quickly dissipated without a sound. The black sword energy surged and condensed into dark clouds high in the sky. A rain of swords fell in Emperor Dong's palace, dispersing all the killing intent. The rain of swords grew heavier and heavier, and the dark clouds under Li Tianlan's feet began to disappear. He stood on the dark clouds condensed by the black sword energy, bathing in the sun. His ruthless black windbreaker kept surging in the sky, and the slightly active golden patterns reflected the bright golden light in the sun. The light completely wrapped Li Tianlan, with a kind of awe-inspiring majesty that couldn't be looked at directly. Li Tianlan recalled the scene just now in silence. There was no sign at all. At first, the virtual line was like a one-dimensional line. Then, the virtual line expanded savagely and rapidly into a two-dimensional plane. The moment the light appeared in front of Li Tianlan, it expanded into a three-dimensional space. In other words, countless virtual lines completely replaced the surrounding space. The line kept expanding. It ignored everything and was unstoppable. In an instant, everything it came into contact with was turned into data. Only Li Tianlan himself became the center of the overwhelming data. Even his sword energy turned into pieces of data, so that it hurt Wang Shengxiao, who had been turned into data, and the dual pupils man who suddenly appeared to save him. Li Tianlan thought silently. He thought about a lot of things. His sword energy was turned into data. Li Tianlan vaguely felt that it should represent something. Countless ideas flashed in his mind, but he couldn't tell what it meant. That unimaginable virtual world was both familiar and disgusting to him. The familiar feeling was easy to explain. It seemed that Xianyuan Wushang had taken him from Beihai to Tiannan in the shortest time in this way. At that time, Li Tianlan was completely blurred, and he didn't even have a similar picture in his memory. He just felt that it was familiar. That was why the so-called familiar feeling came. But where did that feeling of disgust come from? It was completely like an instinct. When the virtual light appeared, Li Tianlan only felt anger and disgust. All the emotions became the most obvious rejection. So Li Tianlan directly broke out with all his strength without any hesitation. Subconsciously, he used the most powerful sword move in the shortest time. It was not until that sword move that he realized that he was using the 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword. In that instant, his attack was so natural, it was simply. But before that, Li Tianlan was not familiar with the sword of 6 Daros of the Wang family of Beihai, except for the sword of Emperor Path. What he was familiar with was the sword intent of the sword of 6 Daos. Li Tianlan didn't understand those virtual lights. If he started from himself, he finally determined the first change after his breakthrough. It was just like the natural 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword. At the moment of the sudden explosion, he had completely used the sword intent of the 6 Daros sword to construct the sword chi of the 6 Daos sword. Then he used the sword chi of the 6 Daos sword to grasp the way to use them. The final explosion was the perfect fusion of the 6 Daos sword chi, and it was sublimated to the extreme. Therefore, that sword was the real 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword. There was no imitation. It was the perfect 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword. This also meant that the Wang family of Beihai's sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation was indeed flawless. At least from Li Tianlan's current height and perspective, he could not find any flaws in the sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation. It was the strongest peak of swordsmanship in the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. It was also the strongest peak in the dark world for hundreds of years. The strongest. This sword was well-deserved. He could defeat Wang Shengxiao entirely because of Wang Shengxiao himself. It was because he was unfamiliar with the 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword. Li Tianlan thought that if he used the 6 Paths of Reincarnation sword with all his strength, it would be hard to say what the result would be when he used the break of reincarnation with all his strength. The dark cloud of sword energy turned into a soft rain of swords, from big to small, and finally turned into nothingness. Li Tianlan opened his palm. The sword energy gathered in his hand. It was not one after another. Instead, they were strung together, piece by piece. He recalled all the opponents he had encountered, different unique skills, different sword energy, and different domains. Beihai, Mount Shu, Jade Pool, Kunlun City. The Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace, the 6 Paths Sword, the Phantom Sword, the Nirvana Sword, the Great Void Sword, the 10th Unique Domain, the 30-meter Mortal World. He turned countless sword intents into the most basic energy. Different energy constructed different sword energy, and combined them into different domains. Therefore, countless unique skills kept gathering, colliding, and simulating in Li Tianlan's hand. The most basic condition was consciousness. Consciousness? Li Tianlan was deep in thought. He still couldn't figure it out, but he vaguely grasped what he had gained after this breakthrough. His body slowly descended in the air. The sun over Emperor Dong's palace, which was still intact in the fierce battle, was bright and clear. Bathed in the sun, Li Tianlan landed in front of Xianyuan Wushang. Big brother is mighty. Xianyuan Wushang gave him a thumbs up and grinned. Li Tianlan also grinned. Perhaps it was because the fat man in front of him looked very funny, or perhaps it was because his temperament was relatively harmless. In short, Li Tianlan was not on guard against him. Even though he knew that his origin was unknown, even though the trigger for his breakthrough was the so-called specialty of his hometown that the other party gave him, even though he knew that his identity was not simple, Li Tianlan felt very relieved when facing him. Tianlan, where is Wang Shengxiao? Qin Weibai came over and asked softly. No one knew what had happened just now. For everyone, the battle ended abruptly. The vast black sword energy swept the sky and covered everything. No one knew what happened to Wang Shengxiao. This question was undoubtedly very important for the current Emperor Dong's palace. If Wang Shengxiao died, then a considerable part of Emperor Dong's palace's energy would be focused on the Wang family of Beihai. He was rescued. Li Tianlan shook his head. Rescued. Qin Weibai's expression was a little strange. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Xianyuan Wushang, who was smiling beside him. Others might not find the virtual light in the black sword energy, but Li Tianlan was sure that Xianyuan Wushang knew something. Military counselor. Li Tianlan suddenly spoke. Your Majesty. Military counselor came over and nodded. Get ready to go to Yuzhou with me later. Li Tianlan said. Military counselor nodded. Even though he had decided to retire, he still looked a little excited when he heard Li Tianlan's words. Li Tianlan obviously didn't want him to get ready alone. As the first chief administrative officer of Emperor Dong's palace, the future direction of Emperor Dong's palace was actually controlled by him. Countless resources were also deployed by him. Obviously, Li Tianlan wanted him to prepare a large team and get in touch with the secret forces of Emperor Dong's palace and Samsara Palace. This trip to Yuzhou was undoubtedly the time to reap the fruits of victory. Li Tianlan looked at Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian and nodded. Come with me. I need an explanation for something. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.